blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Scala, every Saturday night on the LNM Network from 9 p.m. to midnight. And now your host, Scala.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill.
Well, hello and welcome everyone. It is the Red Pill Reality Show. I am your host, Scala. It is an honor and a privilege to have you listen in. We have some more very interesting information tonight. I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. And those of you who help support this station is greatly appreciated because we are in desperate need to continue doing what we do. It's unfortunately it's not free, and there are bills that have to be paid, and we are in that situation right now where another month is coming up and the bills are due, and you can go to www.wcetfm.com, click on donate, or become a subscriber. It's a whopping $5 a month to become a subscriber. The amount of information that you get here, I promise you, is worth every penny of that $5, and it helps us keep going, doing what we're doing. We're not in it for the money. I've said that many times, but unfortunately we do have to have some degree of financial turnaround so that we can keep things going. Anyway, we have a very interesting show again tonight. If you were listening last week, you know that we had a pretty heated discussion at times about what is happening in Virginia. And I believe that all parties involved eventually want the same thing, even though they may not have even though they may not have agreed on everything initially. And throughout the conversation, I believe that we all want the same thing. We want the government that was intended for us to be had. We want the government that was in place initially that was stolen from us back in the late 1800s. That's really what we all want. I think, I'm maybe speaking out of turn here, but if you were made a promise that you were going to get a red balloon, and in fact you didn't get a red balloon, you got some other shade, maybe it was close to red, but not quite red, not deep red, wouldn't you want the red balloon? If that was the promise, wouldn't you want the red balloon? And that's what we're asking for. We're asking for the red balloon. We're asking for restoration. We're asking for something that was stolen from us to be returned. Not a revolution, not a violent overtaking, a legal matter that can be taken care of in the courts. And we'll be talking about that more tonight. Red flag laws, we'll be talking about that tonight. Totally, completely against what we are supposed to be, a free people. Somebody goes in, makes a report about you, you're a dangerous person, you happen to have weapons. They show up at your house ready for war. Ready for war. They're not a couple of gentlemen walking up to your house dressed in a coat and tie. Excuse me, Mr. Smith, we're Detective so-and-so and Detective so-and-so. We're here to collect your guns. We have a report that you're a dangerous man. Yeah, it's a 180 degree from that. A total 180 degree from that. And I've read a couple of articles where already, I don't recall what state it was in, one individual died already because he wasn't about to give up his guns. And I guess the police officers didn't have any more patience. They were going to go ahead and take his guns anyway. He ended up dying. Red flag laws, completely unconstitutional. The disarmament of the citizenry, completely unconstitutional. And what's happening in Virginia is an attempt to completely disarm, totally disarm the citizenry. I didn't like history much when I went to school. I don't know about you, but I don't know, it was boring to me. I didn't really, it was just kind of a waste of time for me. At the time, I realize now how vitally important history is to our future. Because if you don't have a good grasp of what has happened in the past, the people who do this to us, this is a cyclical thing with them. It is a cycle. They let people calm down, then they get everybody all stirred up and do the same thing all over again, add a little different flavor to it. So it's a little variable. It's not quite the same taste as it was the last time, but essentially it's the same thing over and over and over again. It is the, I can't think of the right word to describe it. I guess conditioning, indoctrination, whatever. There's several ways to describe what I'm talking about, but it is a continuous thing that happens in our system. And people are basically oblivious to it. They're not. We're not told about this kind of stuff in school. You know, I'm a little off tonight because I have so many things I want to say, and my mind is going faster than my mouth can say them. But you know, we're not taught these kind of things in school. We're not taught things in school that really that we can use as maybe it would be better determined or better called. Street sense, you know. We're not taught about credit. We're not taught about the use of money. We're not taught about how to determine what kind of job you want, not just on the amount of money that you make, but will that be enough for you to survive, or will it be enough? You know, we're not taught about any of that stuff. What we're taught is basically do this and do that and do the other, and if you don't do as we tell you to do, then you're going to flunk. So it's not a matter of an education more than it is the indoctrination and the ability to remember. It's your memory. The better you can remember, the better you do on the test, the better you'll go through the grades, if you will. So all of these things, when you think about how the general dumbing down of America has been in the last, I don't know how many decades, a purposeful dumbing down of America has been occurring over the last, I don't know how many decades, but it's been going on for some time. We're seeing the fruition of that today. I have a young man who's very dear to me. I love him like a son. Who's so misled, who's so totally off base with his belief system, that it disturbs me, because he is a bright, intelligent young man, and unfortunately he has been, whether he realizes it or not, a victim of conditioning, a victim of taking an agenda, if you will, and having it applied onto someone else's life. And now the fruition of that, that's what I see of that. When he responds to some of the posts that I put up, it saddens me, because he has a skewed version of what the government is. How many others are out there like that we have to deal with? You know, we talked last week about Virginia, and there were sheriffs there in Virginia who stood up and said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to disarm the citizens. We're not going to enforce an unconstitutional law. We took an oath to defend the very thing that you're asking us to destroy. So there were people on the other side, if you will, of the fence, law enforcement. There was some military that came out as well, who said this is not right. This line of thinking that is happening in the country today, I see a stronger and stronger push towards a disarmament of the citizenry and a wide array of excuses in order to do it. But the bottom line is, if you are a truly free person, then you have the God-given right to defend yourself, and no one, no government, no individual has a right to infringe upon that in any way, shape, or form. Now, there are guidelines. If you're an individual who is mentally unstable, has a severe anger problem, no, you shouldn't have a gun. I agree with that. But there should be a process, a transparent process in which that is determined. Transparent meaning anybody can find out what occurred during the process and the decision making, whether this person should have or have not a weapon. Other than that, anybody should have whatever they want. If they can afford an F-16, they should have an F-16. If they got an airfield that can handle a B-52, they should have a B-52. I know it's crazy. But that's what this country was set upon when these, quote, rules were put in place. There was to be a balance between citizenry and government. There was never to be a government that was more powerful than the citizenry, because the people of that time understood what power does to people, how it corrupts the mind and begins a reality that is not what is going on within the general populace. What we have are people who are living in a bubble, if you will, and they believe that because they live in this bubble that they are somehow not subject to the regular laws of everybody else. They get to do whatever they want to do, and we have to obey. It's more like you do what we tell you to do, you can't do as what we do. And what is happening today is very evident of that. It's straight in your face. How many people know that there are absolute criminals walking freely today who work in our government? Now, some people will say, well, it's our government that did this and our government that did that. The government didn't do that. The criminals within the government did that. The system itself is somewhat stable. The problem is we have people that are in the system who are absolutely corrupt and they have no checks and balances regardless of what they tell you. They're not there. They were removed back in the late 1800s. Because the checks and balances that were there prior to that happening, all of this that's going on today, none of it would be going on. We wouldn't have had a 9/11. It would not have happened. We wouldn't have a National Defense Authorization Act. We wouldn't have a Patriot Act. We wouldn't have a Homeland Security. Which, by the way, I just read another article, caught red-handed, illegally busing people into this country. I don't understand it. Here's the people supposed to defend us and they're bringing more people in. We wouldn't have any of that. We wouldn't have a militarized police department that kills people without any penalty at all. How many videos are out there today? And I'm not a police basher. I'm just a truth seeker. How many videos can you find out there where an individual is absolutely unarmed, nothing on him, but he gets murdered? There's no other way to describe it. Murdered. Don't you think for a moment that this government works for your benefit? I can give you example after example after example. People who stood up and were murdered. The one that comes to mind right now is Lavoy Finicum. Stood up to the government and was murdered, and it's on video. And nobody has suffered for that yet justifiably. Nobody has paid a price for that I'm aware of. Nobody that did the shooting has gone to jail. It's more than likely they got promoted. There was an order sent out to kill this man, and they followed the order. We have to stop this nonsense about, I'm going to follow the order regardless of what the order is. I'm going to follow it. How crazy is that? One of the things that I was taught, one of the very first things that I was taught in the service was, if you're given an illegal order, you don't have to obey that order. Well, it's an illegal order to murder somebody. So Lavoy Finicum is one that comes to mind. Ruby Ridge, I can't think of the guy's name. Another one that comes to mind, murdered his wife while she's holding their baby, shot her through the head. Our government. These are the kind of people that we have that take our tax money and then use it for whatever purpose they want. We need to get some balance back, my friends. We need to get some balance back. We need to get our the government that was intended for us back, because that's not what we're under today. And I think you'd have to be sleeping under a rock to think that it is. Any kind of gun, what do they call it? Common sense. Any kind of banning of any kind of weapon goes against the very oath that these people have taken. The oath that they took was to defend the Constitution. By the way, I get so many people who tell me, well, I have this constitutional right and I have that constitutional right. No, you don't. You don't have that constitutional right. You have a God-given right. Your rights didn't come from a piece of paper. If they did, we just rip the piece of paper up and see you bye. We don't need you anymore. Your rights came from our Creator, God-given rights. The purpose of the Constitution was to document what the government was supposed to defend and not infringe upon. It's funny, whenever we have a gun massacre, they all stand up and they say, oh my God, it's time to repeal the Second Amendment. The idea that the Second Amendment is where your rights come from to be able to have a weapon is absolutely wrong. Totally, 100% wrong. We have a right, God-given right, to defend ourselves. Nobody can take that from you. Now, they can if they hold a gun to your head. Okay, I understand that. But when I say nobody, I mean with the authority. They don't have the authority to do that. They have the power. They don't have the authority. And we, the people, have allowed this to go on for far too long. A couple of months ago, I was introduced to something I didn't have any idea even happened. I guess probably, I'm just guessing, but I'm thinking that the majority of the people didn't either. I thought it was so vital to the future of this country. I said, we're going to do some shows about this. We ended up doing 9. I think we're into 11 now. Shows regarding this very topic. We're not living in the United States. We're not living in the America that the forefathers and the framers of this country put together. It's not happening. Now, I don't understand why anybody wouldn't want to go back to the system that was initially intended for us to live under. It has far more checks and balances than the one we have now, and criminals can be far more easily removed rather than have to put up with their nonsense. Smile in your face while they know they've broken all kinds of laws. You and I would be put in jail so far deep behind bars, we wouldn't even see the sunlight. And they're out walking free, millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars in their account. There's a way around all of this insanity. There is. There really is. And we discussed that a little bit last week. We're going to be discussing it again tonight. My main concern right now that I'm seeing the greatest attack upon is the individual citizen, the law-abiding citizen who wants to defend themselves. They're going to turn us into felons if they get their way. And it's happening here in Florida. I've already read another article about another red flag law that they're applying here in Florida. Free men don't ask permission from their servants to do something, because that's what these people are. I'm sick and tired of people calling them leaders. These are our leaders. The hell they are. They're not our leaders. They are our public servants. And that's how they should be referred to. Not out of disrespect, but out of what they are. Because what has happened, as they are our leaders, they have taken advantage of everything they possibly can. They go to work when they feel like going to work. They give themselves a raise when they feel like giving themselves a raise. They complain about if they don't get first grade of everything. Why should they make, in my opinion, it's at least twice, maybe even close to 2.5, possibly even 3 times the average person makes in the United States? Why? Why should they make that? Why are they so special? The idea of them being up there was that they would serve the country, not serve their pockets and their families and hundreds of millions of dollars that are laundered through their different systems that they have where nobody can track it. It's like a giant mafia that we have now. The problem with the giant mafia we have now is they claim themselves to be legal. They're not legal. I need people to wake up. We really are rapidly running out of time. People are just asleep at the wheel with their eyes wide open. It's scary. It is really scary. This insanity about this idea that the reduction of guns is going to make you safer. I want you to think about this for a minute. I mean, it's just common logic. To me, it's clear as day, but I don't know. Some people can't see it, so think about this for a moment. I think, last time I checked, I think it was illegal to drive drunk, right? Are there people that drive drunk? Has it stopped anybody from driving drunk? I think it's illegal to murder people. And the last time I checked, there's people being murdered day in and day out. So if you think for a moment that reducing guns is going to make you more secure, then you're on the completely wrong track, because if you're after the safety of the citizenry of this country, then you should be worried about the people that are here illegally, because they have killed well over 20 times what guns have done. These, quote, mass shootings. Into the thousands of people have been murdered by these people who don't belong here. So if you're interested in saving lives and being secure, then attack what is necessary. What is necessary is to get these people out of our country that don't belong here. They commit crimes, and then through these sanctuary cities, they're turned free, and they do it again. What kind of insanity is that? If we had the right kind of government in place, this would not be happening. We wouldn't be having this conversation. Some of this stuff is so absolutely insane, you just have to wonder, who the hell are these people? What has gotten into them? We talk about these sanctuary cities where this one individual, I can't remember, I think he was in his late 20s. He rapes and murders like an 87-year-old lady in New York and beats the snot out of her. In the process of all of that, then they turn him loose again. I don't know what's wrong with that picture. I can tell you this. This is how sick and twisted our system is. The individual that they turn loose has no business in this country. He's come here illegally. He's already broken the law, and they won't address that. He's already committed murder and rape. They won't address that. But you and I, who are citizens, God forbid we should walk across the street in the wrong way, because they're going to come after us. That's how insane this has become. Don't you think we deserve better than this? With all of the freaking money that I have paid throughout my lifetime to this government, I deserve better. I deserve a hell of a lot better. And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. Year after year after year after year, paying them thousands and thousands of dollars. And what do we have in exchange for that? We have a government that literally turning law-abiding citizens into felons. Doesn't go well with me, doesn't set well, and you can tell I'm already wound up tonight. I read another article today about how they're pushing this thing here in Florida. I don't like the idea of being turned into a felon just because some wise ass decided to sign some piece of paper up there in Tallahassee and do that. Even though it's illegal to do it, they do it anyway. You know, it's like a bully. I think maybe that's why I'm so upset. When I was young, I'll share a true story with you, a life story of mine. It probably was a turning point in my life. I was in 7th grade. There were these 2 9th graders. And by the way, when I was in 7th grade, I was big around with a toothpick. My parents took me to a doctor and said, there's something wrong with this kid. He eats more than all of us put together. He doesn't put on a pound. He's got worms or something. His legs are hollow, whatever it is. And that's how I was. I was very skinny. They didn't like me for whatever reason, I guess because I was skinny, and I wasn't white like they are. They decided to pick on me. They would beat the snot out of me. I would come home, bloody nose, bloody mouth, crying to my mom, and my mom would be frustrated in frustration. What do you want me to do? I don't know these kids. I don't know what to do. Call the police. The police say, well, nobody saw anything. We can't do anything about it. This went on for about 3 or 4 months. And one day I used to ride my bike to school. I'm riding my bike. I didn't realize that they were hiding behind some hedges behind me. And they shot me with a bow and arrow. Now, when I tell you they shot me with a bow and arrow, it's a toy bow and arrow. It's supposed to have a suction cup on the end of it, but they took the suction cup off. So when this thing hit me, it didn't really go into my skin, but it hurt like you know what. I crashed on my bike. I skinned my knee. I hit my head. They came running after me, kicking me and slugging me. Something broke inside of me. Something went off inside of me. I don't really know what. I proceeded to beat the snot out of both of them guys. So badly that they took me, the police came and picked me up because of how bad I beat these kids up. And ever since that time, I have really had a bad taste in my mouth about bullies. And that's what I see today with our government. They're bullying us. They're pushing us against the wall so that we can lash out against them and they can say, hey, look, we're defending ourselves. Look at them. These are domestic terrorists. We have to take care of them. That's what I see coming. If we don't take care of this thing legally now, that's what I see coming. More and more, I see war on our streets. I don't like that. I don't even like the idea, let alone saying it. I don't like the idea that it's possible. You don't think it's possible? Who would have ever thought that it would be possible for an individual to come in to leadership in this country, a leadership position in this country, and expose corruption unlike any other time in the history of our country? Who ever thought that was possible? Because that's what we're happening today. I don't know who to be more upset at, really. I'm upset at myself. Some of this is my fault. Because as I was busy working and trying to support my family and put food on the table, have a place for them to live, clothes on their back, give them a good raising, while I was doing all that, these criminals behind my back were doing things that you and I would go to jail for. And they're walking free. And to me, it's bullying because they're in a position where they can do it and get away with it. And there's nothing that you and I as individuals can do about it. Not as individuals. There's the key. But lo and behold, you and I start working together. This is the very thing that causes them to change their diapers on a regular basis up there. The idea that the citizenry would unite. Why do you think they put so much effort and energy into dividing us, into keeping us in fear, keeping us divided amongst each other? You're black, you're white, you're red, you're yellow, you're Hispanic, you're Asian, you're Muslim, you're Christian, you're Jew, whatever. Anything they can use, whatever they can put in there to pry us apart. The thing that scares the snot out of them, the thing that worries them the most, is our ability to achieve anything we want once we become united in that goal. Well, I am submitting to you tonight. The goal is, I want my freaking government back. That's what I want. I don't want a revolution. I don't want violence. I just want the people who have mistreated us to serve justice. And I want the things that were stolen from us, that were deceptively taken away from us under vile promises that were never met anyway, I want all that fixed. Is that asking too much? If I came to your home, you invited me for dinner, thank you. How gracious of you. I appreciate that. And we sit down, we have a nice dinner together, and we have great conversation, and we talk about all kinds of things. And on my way out, hey, I like this little statue here. I think I'll take that with me. Wouldn't that upset you? Honestly, wouldn't you be upset? Here you are, kind enough to invite me into your home, kind enough to share your food with me, break bread with me, have great conversation with me, and on my way out, I decide I'm going to take something that doesn't belong to you. Don't tell me you wouldn't be upset. Then why the hell aren't you upset at what is going on today in this government? Because they are stealing from you and me day in and day out. What has this Congress succeeded in doing? Since the time they were elected, they've done zero for you and me. What can you and I as individuals do about it? Not a damn thing. What can you and I together do about it? Holy smokes, get out of the way. That's what I'm trying to get across to people tonight. Enough of this insanity that we've been dealing with. We have areas where police will shoot somebody completely unarmed and walk away with impunity. Nothing. You and I see it, and it's clear murder. There's no question about it. One guy shot at a kid. I don't remember whether he killed a kid or not. He shot at him, unloaded his entire clip, 15 rounds, as the kid is running away from him. I'm in fear of my life. The child is running away. What the hell is that? We gotta do something to help straighten this stuff out, people. And the way that we're going to straighten this stuff out is to start working together. I believe we all have a common goal. We'd like to live in peace at some time. I don't know if it'll ever be in my lifetime, but at some time I would like to see our society live in peace, that there would be a future for my children and my grandchildren. Because right now there isn't. Right now it's just a very dark future. That's not to take anything away from this president. He's done a great job in certain areas. He's done really well. I give him credit for that. But it's not him that's the problem. It's the system. You can't fix a broken system the way that they have done it to us, because the way that they attempt to fix it is to tell you more lies and put a Band-Aid over a deep wound. No, you're going to have to take that wound, open it up. It's going to be painful. There's going to be blood. You have to clean it out, dress it up, and sew it back together so that when it heals properly. I've never seen division in this country as I've seen until recently. Never. And I went through the 60s where the riots were, racial riots were running a mess. I've never seen it as bad as it is today. Let me clarify that. As bad as the media wants you to believe it is today. Because that's what they want. As long as we allow them to do that, they'll continue doing it. At some point in life, you on the other side of the microphone have to realize you have a responsibility as a human being. Let's put Democrats and Republicans and governments and all that aside for a moment. We are human beings. We're supposed to be the smartest species on this planet. We have more in common with each other than we do different. I would tend to think that the majority of us want to live in peace and be happy. I mean, that may be an oversimplification, but I think everybody would agree on that. And there's no way in hell that's going to happen in the system that we have today. It perpetuates itself on war. It perpetuates itself on deception. It perpetuates itself on dishonesty. The more dishonest you are, the greater you, and the faster you can climb the ladder. Look at the last president. Do you think that was an honest man? Oh, please. He didn't even use his real name. The person he was married to wasn't born as a woman. Let's get the real truth out. Deception, lies, dishonesty. This is how they get to where they're going. This is what we've lived with for the last how many decades? How many of you had enough of this? I have. And I believe there's a lot more people who have. I think there's a lot of people in Virginia who are at the very edge, literally, of a revolution. And the last I heard, and I don't know if we're going to have Chrissy on with us tonight. I hope she'll call in. Maybe she can tell me. But the last I heard, they're still trying to pass red flag laws. After all of that, and then the last estimate was around 60,000 people showing up in Virginia protesting. And the media calls them, what did they call them? Anti-something. Anti, I don't know. But instead of calling them a pro-Second Amendment, they called them anti. This is the game that they use with the words in the media to get the people into a negative connotation about something. They refer to the militia as something bad. They refer to patriots as something bad. It was the militia and the patriots that helped to cause this country to be what it is today. Well, what it was back then before it is today. If we didn't have them, we wouldn't be here today. So they're not villains. They're not criminals. Well, maybe some of them are. But generally speaking, no. That's not what it is. A patriot is somebody who cares about the country and the betterment of our country for everybody. How is that bad? In the eyes of these people that are, quote, our leaders, if you're somebody who doesn't go along with their program, then you are a domestic terrorist. You should be focused on. Your life should be made miserable in whatever way they can do to you. If you think I'm exaggerating, go talk to Ammon Bundy. Go talk to one of the Hammonds. and see what they did to them. And see if they had a nice life being put in solitary confinement for God knows how long. For nothing. For not really anything. So if you think for a moment that the government is going to work in your favor, you're sadly mistaken. Beside the fact that the government that we have isn't the government that was intended for us. It's a lie. I'm tired of living lies. I'm tired of people taking advantage of me. I'm tired of people bullying me like they did when I was in 7th grade. And that's exactly what they're doing to us today. It's just on an even higher level than then. Because now we're talking about our lives. Back then we were just beating the snot out of me. Now we're talking about our lives, our financial life, our spiritual life, our physical life. They're attacking us at all angles. The air that we breathe is contaminated. The water that we drink is full of fluoride. The foods that we eat are genetically modified. Come on, wake up. These people have it out for us. You think they eat any of the stuff that they feed us? Come on. That's what do they call it? Livestock. That's livestock food. We are their livestock. That's how they look at us. They can cull us whenever they want. They can grow us whenever they want. I know there's people out there laughing at me thinking that all of this is my imagined God. Scholar, you have really gone off the deep end tonight. I'm telling you, since 2002, I have been researching. And since that time, I have found all kinds of things that for many people would just turn the hairs on the back of your neck into a curl that governments have done to their people secretly and openly. Every war that we are in is illegal. Every one of them. Every one of these wars was planned long before we ever attacked. How do you like that? Did you know that? That Syria, that Iran, that Afghanistan, that Iraq, that Libya were all in the plan before we attacked any of these guys. Long years before we attacked any of these guys. This is the kind of government that we're dealing with. Well, let me back up a minute. This is the kind of people in the government that we're dealing with. And in my opinion, in my view, the way that we're going to balance this thing out, we start at the local level and we work our way up. And we demand. We're not asking. We're demanding for our country back. Don't go away.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin.
There are facts we're not being told on TV, so I want to talk to you about gun control in America. Why did all of the big media focus their attention on the attacks in Orlando and completely ignore the fact that the following weekend 52 people were shot in Chicago, a city with some of the strictest gun control laws in the country? There seems to be an agenda for gun control while ignoring the gun violence in other cities and countries where the experiment of gun control is already underway and failing. I carry a gun because there are only two types of creatures on this planet, predators and prey. No one watches a cheetah chase down a gazelle and deny that the gazelle has the right to use its horns to protect itself. But there are people who would deny that same right of self-defense to other human beings. Such people seem to think that the way to stop the cheetah is to cut the horns off the gazelle. That somehow, if you make it easier for the predator will simply go away. It doesn't work that way. If you make it easier for the predator, you get more predators. I carry a gun because when predators know they're less likely to have an advantage, they're less likely to be a predator. The FBI found that when states allow concealed carry, murder rates are immediately reduced. And cities in America that pass a law requiring households to have a firearm see the number of home invasions drop dramatically. I carry a gun because the ratio a gun is used in a homicide is significantly less than when it's used in self-defense. Firearms are used up to 300 times more often to save innocent lives than commit a murder, and guns prevent up to 2.5 million crimes in the U.S. every year, often without a single shot ever being fired. I carry a gun not because it's a weapon, but because it's a shield. 200,000 women every year use a gun to defend themselves against sexual abuse. I carry a gun because almost every mass shooting in the last 50 years took place in a gun-free zone. Law-abiding citizens are forced to give up their right to protect themselves, while every criminal breaks the law, including gun-free signs, when they decide to murder. I carry a gun because a gun-free zone makes it easier for predators to target their prey. Stricter gun laws make the problem worse, and making guns illegal wouldn't remove murder from our cities any more than making heroin illegal stop addicts from doing drugs. I carry a gun because the facts are nations with strict gun control laws have significantly higher murder rates than those that don't. I carry a gun because I know in the U.S. scissors and knives kill almost 5 times more people every year than rifles do, including the AR-15 and other so-called assault rifles. Calling to ban a tool will not resolve the problem. I carry a gun because criminals break the law with or without them. The 9/11 terrorists used box cutters in airplanes. Timothy McVeigh used bags of assault fertilizer. I understand that some people want to blame things like semi-automatic rifles, 30-round magazines, hate crimes, terror threats, gun control, historic flags, national security, religion, or illegal immigration. I understand we want to blame something, anything that we can control. But don't blame me because I carry a concealed gun to protect my family. I understand we need to start addressing what we really want to ban: violence, murder, and insanity. I carry a gun because I know who's pushing to ban them. Our right to bear arms is not there simply to protect us against lowly criminals. I know the politicians know this, which is why they call for gun control instead of crime control. I carry a gun because I've seen gamblers who want more winnings, alcoholics who want more alcohol, and people with power want more power. I understand what the Founding Fathers knew, that the right to bear arms is there to protect the American people from those drunk with power, and I understand every country was free before it wasn't. I carry a gun because having the right to bear arms gives the citizens of this great nation a fighting chance against the predators of greed and power, whether in our home, our capital, or our neighboring lands. Evil exists only because too many good people stand by and do nothing. I know seeing America's right to free speech was a chilling wake-up call when it became locked away in a zone. That's why so many steadfast Americans and great organizations stand up for the people to keep the balance of power from tipping over. I carry a gun because it removes the unfair advantage between predators and prey. I don't carry because I'm looking for a fight. I carry a gun because I'm looking to be left alone. People can only persuade you to do something by one of two ways: reason or force. Having a gun with me removes their option to make me do something by force. It helps keep predators civilized. That's why the right to bear arms is important. That's why I own a firearm, and that's why I'm proud to say I carry a gun.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show on the LNM Network. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
They never wanted him to be president. They never even thought it was possible.
This isn't the real presidential run. Trump will not be president.
He will never be president.
But then, America spoke.
A complete earthquake.
Donald Trump wins the presidency.
And when President Trump was sworn in as the 45th president of the United States, the left lost it. This impeachment sham started the day he was elected.
The first headline in the Washington Post before the president was inaugurated was they were going to impeach him.
I will fight until he is impeached.
We're going to go in there and we're going to impeach the mother.
I'm concerned that if we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected.
This is about preventing a potentially disastrous outcome from occurring next year.
They're impeaching me. You know why? Because they want to win an election. And that's the only way they can do it.
So let's be clear. This is not some neutral judgment that Democrats came to reluctantly. It's not some somber moment or serious exercise for the left. It is the predetermined end of a partisan crusade.
Nancy Pelosi has said she's not going to send the articles of impeachment over.
Wait a minute. It's not very serious if you're not sending over the articles.
For handing out souvenir impeachment pens.
The Congress is wasting a lot of their time and our time.
I've been a Democrat for 49 years. I'm very disappointed in the Democratic Party right now.
They are trying to prevent President Trump from winning a second term.
An angry mob is at the gate, but the United States Senate has the watch. The Senate exists for moments like this. So it's time for the adults in the room to have their seat at the table. Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats have had their turn. The sham is over. A fair trial starts now.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Goes, 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 goes,
Now, from sunny South Florida, it's the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscala. Every Saturday night from 9 p.m. to midnight on the L&M Network. And now, your host, Riscala.
All right, we are back. It is the Red Pill Reality Show, an honor and a privilege to be with you. We are, let's try that again in English this time. We are broadcasting live from the southeast portion of South Florida out of Palm Beach County. It was a gorgeous day here in South Florida today. Wow. One of the few days that we actually observed that's just, oh my gosh. The temperature was perfect. The skies were clear. We weren't saturated with aerosol toxic metals. I'll tell you what. They cry about climate change, but they won't tell you the truth. If humans are, and I doubt seriously, but if they are playing a part in climate change, let's start with spraying the skies day in and day out with God knows what. Every day in, day out, they spray the skies, and then now they're open about it. Now they claim that they're going to reduce the amount of heat from the sun coming up. It's all lies. It's all nonsense. Anyway, let's move forward. I've got Milo with me. I've got David with me. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me go to David first. Welcome, David. Thank you.
Hello, Riscala. Glad to be with you again tonight.
And I appreciate you taking the time to call in. Milo, welcome, Milo. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Riscala. How are you tonight?
A little wound up.
We noticed.
A little wound up tonight. I again, I don't know who to be more upset with, myself or the people who are doing this, or the people that are allowing this. You know, many people don't realize that we allow this. We are permitting this to go on. If you understand the way things work, it's supposed to work. Let me back up a minute. If you understand how the way things are supposed to work, you understand that it's the people who are supposed to designate what is going on. It's in the betterment of the people, and that's not what's been happening. And I just, I'm watching this crazy. How much money are they spending on the show? I mean, I don't know what else you call it. It can't be. It's so ridiculous. What's going on? I'm watching our government.
Riscala, I've called it a circus for some years now, and there was a meme that went around back when I first got involved with America's Remedy, and it was a meme that said, "Not my circus, not my monkey."
Yeah, but unfortunately, we're under the same tent, and that's until we can get our own tent. You know what I'm saying? We may not be part of them, but we have to live with these.
Well, Riscala, if I might say something, you know me enough now to know that I really admire what Jefferson and Adams and Franklin and I think it was George Mason and one other fellow whose name I can't remember, the Committee of Five did when they created the Declaration of Independence and then proposed it to Congress, to the Second Continental Congress. And it has a statement in there that I think is really appropriate in understanding where we're at. And it was true then and it's true now that we're more prone to suffer while evils are sufferable than to alter the forms to which we are accustomed. That's human nature.
Okay, wait a minute, David. Go back and put it in layman's terms because I'm not clear about what.
We're not gonna change anything until we really have to.
I agree with that.
We're willing to sit. We're willing to sit and wait to see if it'll all correct itself.
Yeah.
But then it says, after a long train of abuses and usurpations, I was telling Milo today, we talked a little earlier today, and I said, yeah, there's about 30 more cars that have been added to the train. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, which is to take away our inalienable and constitutional rights, it gives evidence of a design. It says evinces a design, but it's giving evidence of a design to put us under an absolute despotism. That's where we're seeing happening. That's when the sleeping giant, the sleeping bear wakes up. And I'm really not quite as, I don't know what the right word is, pessimistic or cynical or despairing as many of my friends are, because in order for you to find a way out, you first have to realize there's a problem. You can't diagnose a cancer until you first see there's a cancer. Okay? In other words, people are beginning to realize that it's not as, I'll use an old term from years ago, hunky-dory, as hunky-dory as it used to be.
Yeah.
Okay? We're starting to understand that there's a threat. And the people are waking up. It's not being hidden from their minds anymore.
No, it's in your face. That's what I'm saying.
So I'm excited. I'm thrilled about what happened in Virginia, because all of a sudden the people are going, oh my gosh, what's going on? This is, to me, a moment of, I think, extreme joy for those who understand what we have to get, where we have to go. And tonight we're going to have, and I know you're going to share this, but Beau Webster is going to be on the show tonight, and he's a man who recently got kicked in the side of the head, proverbially speaking, and all of a sudden realizes just how terrible the system is. He's an incredibly impressive guy who just got hit with a 2x4. And when people hear his story tonight, they're going to go, if it can happen to him, it can happen to anybody.
And not to discredit him in any way, shape, or form, but I've said, look at what they're doing to the president. I've just put all the system and the brokenness aside for a moment. Here's a multi-billionaire, and they're literally blaming him for something that he's really not guilty of. But because they're in a position that they can do it, they're doing it because for whatever myriad of reasons. My point being is that every person, regardless of whether you care for this president, whether you don't care for this president, you should be extremely concerned with what's going on, because they're in your face and telling you, if you don't agree with what we want, we're taking you out. And how many people do you know that are multi-billionaires that could even possibly afford the legal process, let alone the spiritual attack, the physical attack upon him? How many times has he been threatened with physical attack time and time and time again? He has a lot better things he could be doing. But my point being is that when these people who are unfortunately in a place of authority have a plan in place and you don't go with that plan, they can take any one of us out. And the best example I can give you is the president. Even the president isn't safe from these people. That's how disgusting this is.
Well, what we're now seeing is that it doesn't matter if you're at the top of the food chain or at the bottom of the food chain. Exactly. That's what I think we're identifying in the circumstances that we're seeing at every level all around us at the moment.
How much more dangerous would it be, God forbid, if it happened to one of us? My God, it would totally devastate my life if something like that.
It is happening to one of us.
No, I mean in the manner, and to the extent that it's going on, like with the president, that somebody would take you to court and drag you through court and literally financially drain you. It would be the end. I can't imagine that. Who has the ability?
So it is happening to more than just one of, quote, us. I mean, I imagine that what he was referencing was Beau's situation, and if Beau didn't have the connections that he had, where would he be?
He would probably be 6 feet under. He would probably be 6 feet under.
He would be, because they wouldn't have recognized him when they came into the house. and they would have treated him as if he was a very dangerous man.
Right.
That's the thing that's going on now and this goes back historically to the same incident that happened in the Boston Massacre, where they shot some innocent citizens, and the people of Boston said, well, if that can happen to them, it can happen to all of us. And then they barricaded Boston, and the people in the rest of the country said, if they can do it to Boston, they can do it to our town. And so there's a goodness in what's going on. And the goodness is that we have an opportunity to see the extremism, to see how far that this can go. And we can say, this is not just isolated to one individual at the top of the food chain or at the bottom. It's something that is going to impact every single one of us.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded of the last paragraph of the Maryland Resolves, where it says that we need to put aside all of our differences about politics and religion and every quarrel and animosity of every kind. And we need to focus upon preserving our freedom. And we need to make that the clarion call of the day. So to me, this is an opportunity for us to wake up and understand what's going on. And there was a group of men, and it was called the men of Issachar in the Bible, and it said that they were more noble because they understood the times. And so that's where I think we're at right now, is do we understand the times that we're in, and are we willing to unite around that understanding?
What do you think, Milo?
I think some people understand the times. I think more and more people by the day are waking up to it.
I agree with that.
And,
yep.
I mean, as times change, I mean, I'm not a particularly religious person, Riscala. I know that David knows this about me, but I do believe in a deity, and I do believe that there is a greater plan, a plan that we don't understand. And all that I can really do sometimes is just kind of find some solace in the faith that I have, that things happen when they're supposed to happen, and they happen the way that they're supposed to happen. And so I know that we could get ourselves worked into a frenzy over worrying about what isn't in place properly, or what's not, what could go wrong, what are the problems that we're bound to encounter. And all that we can do is look ahead to them with some intelligence and take the precautions that we're able to, and leave the rest in the hands of, the Creator. So we leave the rest in the hands of fate, if you want to call it that. Whatever. I think cultures all over the world have had different names for basically the same thing. And I mean, people tend to worry about things, I believe, that perhaps I'm not saying don't be concerned. I'm just saying don't let your worry paralyze you.
Yeah. I feel pretty much the same way you do. I don't like religion. I think religion was man-made. It's all, people put in place to control people, really. In my personal opinion, if you're offended by that, no apologies. I don't think that there's anywhere in the Bible says you have to be a particular religion. I do think that there's plenty of places, if you're a person who does read the Bible, that it points out it's all about relationships, time and time again. There is a relationship that is a vital relationship, your personal relationship with our Creator. None of this stuff, they say there was a big boom and all this stuff just came into play. I'm sorry, that doesn't work that way. Look at the complexity of just a human eye. You can't tell me that there isn't intelligent design behind that. There's no way in the world you'll ever convince me. Just the eye. Forget the whole body. Just look at the eye. My gosh. Just the eye itself would tell you that and then if you look our surroundings, look at the planet. The planet, I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe the planet is a living organism. It is alive, just as we are alive, just like trees are alive. The planet is constantly growing. I don't know if there's any data on it, but I'm willing to bet that the planet is physically bigger today than it was, say, 25,000 years ago. And maybe not by much, but it's bigger because it is alive. It is growing. Anything that is alive grows. I don't know of anything that's alive that just stops growing. Something grows. You know what? The most common thing for human beings, we may stop growing up, but many of us grow out. But there are parts of our body that literally continue growing. Our ears and our noses, as we get older, continue to grow. And you can see that evident. And older people have bigger ears. that part of their body doesn't stop growing. So if it's alive, I'm convinced that it's growing. I'm convinced this planet is alive, and it's growing. What is concerning me right now is the lack of growth that I see in people's ability to understand something very simple, and that is we're not living as free people. There's nobody that can convince me that we are living as a free people with all of the things that are in place today, all of the permissions that you need to have, with all of the restrictions that are upon us. I think of if you want to take an aircraft ride, just within the United States, look at what you have to go through. Just to take a ride on an aircraft. I don't do it anymore. It's not worth it to me. Unfortunately, I don't have to travel. There was a time I had to. But I don't do it anymore. It would only be for pleasure for me, and forget it. I'll drive. But look at what you have to go through. Is that what a free person does? Because in a real free society, you wouldn't have to endanger your physical health to be able to get on an aircraft, because that's what you're doing when you go through these machines. You're subjected to God knows how much what, and they won't tell you. If they had two men walking different areas of the complexes with dogs, you wouldn't need those machines. Whoever had a bomb would never even enter the place. So again, I'm getting off track. What I'm saying is we're not living under a system that we were intended to live in, even though everything has grown since that time. I know we're not in the late 1800s anymore. I know that we've advanced considerably since then. But our system, the base core of the system that was initially in place, was taken away from us. And had that core grown with us, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. I think that's the easiest way for me to explain it.
I think I agree with you, Riscala.
You know, it's interesting. We're going to have Beau on in just a second, I know. And I think it's interesting that even in spite of what happened to him, the very fact he had a vested authority in his experience. He was recognized by the law enforcement community. And that actually is why he was able to have a way out when most of the other people didn't. And that really is, in a sense, a piece of the proof of the value of vested authority that we need to get back to in this country so that people have a chance. It mitigates the problems. It brings about a way for all of us to be on a much more level playing field and not be abused. And so I'm pretty excited to have this conversation going on tonight.
Well, I think that we do have him on the line. Beau, welcome. Thank you for taking the call, for calling in, and I welcome you to the Red Pill Reality Show.
Thank you very much.
So we've talked a little bit kind of here and there about what has happened to you, but I'd like to give you the floor for a moment just to kind of give us a Reader's Digest version of what happened to you, of all people, to you.
Well, I've got a law enforcement background, and I'm an investigator. And I guess how everything started here was that I attempted to serve some federal papers at a correctional institute. And when I asked for the party that is being served to come outside, he came outside and then denied that it was him and that he would refuse the papers. And I told him that it was him because he identified him. When I asked his name, that was his name, and his name was also on his uniform, on his lapel. And he refused the papers and pretty much told me that I would have to leave the premises. And at that time, I'm able to drop the papers at his feet. And he let the papers drop, and then he went inside the facility, and a couple of people that worked there at the facility walked outside, picked them up, put them on a trash container, on the top of a trash container, and then he came back outside and threatened me and wanted to know who I was, and I had already explained all that when I was trying and attempting to serve him the papers. He then walked out to the parking lot and was able to identify my vehicle because he probably recognized every car out there but mine, and proceeded to write down the tag number on my vehicle. And kept threatening me and wanting to know who I was, and that I really felt by that time that he might try to do bodily harm to me. And I'm unarmed because I'm at a federal institution. And I saw a passerby, a vehicle that belongs to the facility, and it was a armed guard. And I asked him if he would just stop his vehicle and stand by while I got to my vehicle. And he said he couldn't help me, got back in his truck and left. I immediately then called 911 and got an officer to respond to the scene, at which time we, conversed out in the parking lot. And then one of the lieutenants at the facility came out and wanted to know what was going on. And I explained it to him, and they said that they would not take the papers, and would have to go through the federal attorney. So that arrangements were made. And then come Sunday, a few days later, our residence was surrounded by law enforcement officers, and they had both driveways, a circular driveway, cordoned off with their SUVs so that we couldn't get in or off the property. And then they had the front door surrounded with armed law enforcement. And my wife had explained to me, or yelled to me, that there was someone on the property, and I was going out the front door, and then she said it's police officers, and she asked what they were looking for, and they said, "Is your husband here?" I immediately walked outside, and they asked me to give my given name, and at that time, they asked me if I was a process server, and I said, yes, I am. I'm also an investigator and former law enforcement. And at that time, they, just a minute, please. At that time, they became somewhat relaxed and relieved because they identified me as being a investigator that has helped them in the past on other situations and other cases over the years. They asked if I had made contact with this particular person at that Federal Correctional Institute, and I said, yes, I had. And they said, well, we have papers here. It's injunction papers pertaining to me that they were here to collect any kind of guns that I may have. And it was about a 2.5 page injunction letter where he had fabricated all these stories and had gone to the sheriff's department that Sunday morning, about 4 hours prior to them coming to the residence. He had gone to the sheriff's department and filed this injunction against me and made up all these stories that I was a threatening person, that I would approach law enforcement and have a shootout with them, that I was extremely dangerous, that I was a threat to his wife and to his child because I had been stalking them for a period of about 2 years. I had never laid eyes on his family or him prior to this day that I served him. I knew nothing about this man prior to that. So all this fabricated story was typed up on an injunction form and handed to me. And then they said that they would have to take my weapons, which they did. And they took those to the sheriff's department and put them in safekeeping. And 4 days later, I was in trial where I had 3 attorneys representing me and a courtroom full of people that are actually competitors of mine or friends that I do business with, that said, there's no way this can happen to you. And they all showed up, and we went to trial that day. And
I take it that you won.
Yes. I mean, immediately he was asked if he was ready to proceed with the trial, and he said, "No, Your Honor, I need 45 days." And the judge asked him, "Why do you need 45 days?" And he said, "I'm not prepared. I don't have the money at this time. And I also need all my witnesses to come forth. I have no one here in the courtroom." He had no one there except himself. The judge immediately denied anything that he had requested, and he said, "We will proceed." He said, "If you look at this courtroom, this gentleman has 3 attorneys here, and he has a courtroom of people in the courtroom, and he's prepared to start trial, and so we will proceed." And we were there for probably about 4.5, 5 hours, and everything was at the very end, everything was in my favor. I had to go to the sheriff's department the next morning, which was Friday morning, and get my weapons back, at which time it took about 3.5 hours for FDLE to clear my name and all my licenses, because everything had been suspended.
Oh, my God.
And yeah, it's
Wow.
awful.
So here's my concern. Of course, there's a couple of concerns, but here's the first one that comes to mind. This guy you were serving him because he was in some kind of legal trouble, right?
Correct.
Okay, so how is it that somebody who's already in some kind of legal trouble can create all of this trouble for you? I mean, they took his word as though that was gospel. Isn't there a requirement that they should, hey, wait a minute, okay, all right, we'll take all that, thank you, appreciate it, and then go check it out before they, shoot the gun, so to speak? Isn't there a procedure?
That you're bringing up a good point, Riscala, which points back to what I said to Beau when he told me the story the other day. I said, you were a victim of the
Red flag law.
Stoneman Douglas security law.
Yeah.
In other words, the red flag law of Florida was in place to do to Beau exactly what happened to him, and it's predictable that it's going to do exactly what happened, because it completely denies
there's no due process.
Our and constitutional rights.
There's no due process. And then if the judge were, let's just say the judge had any question in his mind and said, okay, prosecution, we'll give you your 45 days. Here's another 45 days he can't work, right? You wouldn't be able to work, would you, Beau? Because you wouldn't be able to, you'd be on a blacklist, so to speak, correct?
Well, correct, because my licenses had really been revoked at that time.
Suspended,
Right, and I had also had no type of weapons to
defend himself.
Myself.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing that people need to understand. That hearing that Beau had 4 days later is essentially a hearing that should be when the judge would determine that an injunction would be necessary. In other words, the judge created an injunction against Beau without any hearing that was used for the SWAT team or quasi SWAT team to come in to his property and demand his weapons. There wasn't a preliminary hearing of any sort to allow for there to be the evidence that Beau had done something wrong that would have triggered, no pun intended, the confiscation of his weapons. In other words, this thing is completely flipped on its head.
Yeah.
Is that not a common element? And by the way, Beau, thank you for sharing this story. We've not spoken before, but I appreciate your being on and sharing all of that. It's very disturbing. But is that not a common element with the red flag laws as they're typically written in any of the states that have enacted them? Is that you act to paraphrase the president, you take the guns first and have due process.
Yeah, boy, that was a scary. Phew.
That's exactly what the red flag laws are. You take the guns first and then you ask the questions later.
Yeah. Now, a couple of things.
Preliminary disarmament.
A couple of things that come to mind. First of all, I understand, Beau, you don't live in the middle of town, right?
No, sir.
So you're out like in the suburbs, like a mini ranch or something?
Correct.
And how many officers showed up?
I think there were 5 of them, or 5 or 6 of them, about a half a dozen.
And were they dressed as SWAT? They had the automatic rifles and the headgear and all of that.
They were in full uniform. They had they had all their weapons, and I can't say they had their vests. I don't think they had the helmet. No, I know they didn't have the SWAT helmets on, which I'm very familiar with my background.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very disturbing. I mean, I told them before they left that I felt like Ted Bundy, that I had just committed such a heinous crime.
Wow.
Murder.
Wow.
And that it's just unfortunate, but on the paperwork, it's got listed domestic violence. Well, that's one of the most serious offenses that you can have, other than maybe murder.
Mm-hmm.
When the police look at that and they're on their way here, they're thinking and expecting
you're a threat already. Yeah, you're already a threat before they even. Before they even get there, you're already a threat when they see that.
Correct.
And so here's another angle at this story. Thank God that these people recognize you, but let's say that they came to somebody like me and I lived out there and they're going to take me. Well, you're going to what? I'm not going to voluntarily give you my guns. We're going to have a shootout. And I think that's what this guy who filed all this paperwork planned, because of the way that you're saying that he worded something. You're a dangerous man. You've threatened people, blah, 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 blah. And nobody checks it out. So on the way out there, I'm sure they're thinking to themselves, this guy. And did you also mention that he said he put in the report that he would have a shootout, that he would shoot it out, that you would shoot it out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And no, you're absolutely right. I mean, being that I'm former law enforcement, when we would get calls like this, I mean, you're on high alert and you don't know what to expect, and you're expecting the worst. And I told them, I said, I totally understand what's going on, and I'm not blaming you guys at all, and I'm not. But it's the verbiage that this guy put in this injunction that raised a red flag, and the judge just took it upon himself just to go ahead and assume that this guy was correct in everything that he was saying, and he just put in there that I'm a dangerous old man, and that I'm a threat to society, and I mean, he just went on and on and on, and everything in that report and in that injunction was incorrect.
So did he get in any trouble?
Nothing other than, eventually, what he's being charged with, that will come about.
No, but, okay, let's put that aside for a minute. He just attempted to destroy your life. He's going to walk away from this. Maybe you could file a civil suit, but I mean, legally, they're not going to do anything to him?
Not as of this time, they're not.
See, now that's even worse. It's like a double stab in the back. So they know that this was a false report. They know that your life was on the line, whether you want to admit that or not. You're a former LEO, so their thoughts coming out there. They've been told he's going to have a shootout. He'll shoot out with you. Their hearts are pumping as fast as they can go. Their adrenaline is flowing. When you show up, or when they show up at your place, their fingers are ever so close to the trigger, and it doesn't take much. It doesn't. Just the wrong move would have.
They were barricaded. They were barricaded behind the cars at the front door, and around the side of the residence. And they had taken cover, and naturally, like I said, I can't blame them, but they didn't know what to expect, and they were expecting the worst.
So, Beau, what do you, other than them, prior to them recognizing who you were you calm? I mean, for me, I would have been freaking and I'd probably changed my underwear. Were you calm when all of this was going on? Or I'm not trying to be smart. I'm trying to get an idea of what's going through your head when all this is happening.
Well, like I said earlier, the first thing that was going through my head was I'm extremely violated here, and that I'm a threat to society, and that I have just committed this heinous crime of, maybe multitudes of murders, and that I was not collective and subdued. I was angry. I just, my tone of voice, that I was upset, and that I was upset that I was being accused falsely of something that I had no control over and something that I didn't do. It was all a lie.
See, fortunately, they recognized who you were. I think that had you not been recognized as that, and you had every right to be mad. My God, I would have been steaming. I know I would hate to imagine myself in a situation like that, being blamed for something I didn't do, and then showing up to my home literally armed to the teeth, ready to kill. And the only guilty thing is I happen to be at the address that you're coming to. Other than that, I haven't done anything wrong. So for me, I would fear anything like that. And I think the average person, given the same situation, they've done nothing wrong, for whatever reason they're there, and they're there in violation of their very rights. I don't know if it's fair to compare it, but it's almost like being raped. Your very personal area is raped. You've taken away from me the very thing that can protect my life. I don't know how much more violated you can be. I mean, I'm not to take anything away from the rape of women, but trying to understand that how much more violated, as a man, how much more violated could you be? Everything your home. They show up to your home.
You can't. There's no way to describe it, and you can't be any more violated. And I just felt like he had the upper hand, which he did, and for no reason. I mean, I did nothing to this man. I did nothing to his family, and come to find out, after this was all over, this was someone else that had tried to find him over about a period of a year and a half or so, or maybe longer, and it wasn't me. And
I'm getting some noise from somebody. Let's see if I can.
Yeah, I hear a lot.
Yeah, I think it's from Milo. I'm getting some noise from you, Milo. Or go ahead, Beau.
But no, it's it's a terrible feeling, and I just don't know how it stops, because nowadays it just seems like anyone can just go into a law enforcement office and file an injunction, and it sticks. And like you said earlier, thank God it was me. But if I was just a regular civilian out on the street, and they come to my house and do all this, I've got a major expense to defend myself, and not only the expense, but am I ever going to get this off my record? Domestic violence. If I'm a young man and I go to apply for a job, if I'm in my 30s, will I ever get a good paying job? Because now I'm labeled as a domestic violent person. And, I work these kind of cases every day, and I've got some cases that I've had in the recent past, and these poor young men, and I mean, they're college age, are now suffering this on their records because they were arrested for domestic violence or dating violence, either or, and they're suffering. They're going through a lot, and it was proven in the investigation that never happened, and they should have never been charged or arrested for that kind of offense.
Wow.
So, may I interject a question real quick?
Go ahead, Mother.
You have relationships, obviously, as you've expressed, with the law enforcement community in your area, and I presume it extends somewhat, probably even beyond that, to people who are involved in, the courts and that kind of thing. But my question is this: have you gotten any indication in the time since this took place from anyone that you know in law enforcement? How did those people feel? I mean, about being put in that situation, because I'm sitting here listening to this story, and I agree with Riscala. I mean, I would be angry and confused and upset, and I would have a lot of different emotions going through my mind if I were in your shoes. But I'm also pondering what would it be like to be in their shoes, because the way you described them being on your property and the way that they were hunkered behind their vehicles.
They're ready.
They never know what to expect. I mean, what are their opinions about this Stoneman-Douglas Act and this kind of, being asked to do this as their job? Because I'm feeling like they're being told by politicians for politicians' political benefit. They're being told to put their lives in unnecessary risk, is the way I see it.
Right, and I've never spoken to the officers that were out here that day and gotten any kind of feedback. And I do have good friends and good connections all over, and I've just never really confronted the situation or asked any opinions. I just haven't. I haven't done that.
Beau,
I was just curious.
Go ahead, Milo.
It was a terrible thing too, because just a day or two, actually it was the next day that they were here and took my weapons. I had two other incidents that I had no way to defend myself, no weapons, and I was told and threatened verbally that they were going to blow my brains out before I left their property. And I mean, it's just going through my mind immediately that I can't believe that this is happening to me. And now I have no way of defending myself. And I got people, I'm on their property trying to serve papers, and they're threatening to blow my brains out before I leave the property. So when I was able to get out, which was just a quick move, I immediately had to call 911 and get the sheriff's department to be sent out because, I was threatened again. And that happened twice within that 1 week period.
Is that the same sheriff's department that showed up at your house?
Yes, it is.
Was it any of the people that showed up at your house showed up there?
No, sir. It was a different group.
So I know since this has happened to you, this has really and rightfully so, really put a bad taste in your mouth about all this, and you'd like to see some kind of change somewhere. Milo brought up an excellent question, and you answered that you haven't talked to him. Maybe I'm just a suggestion on my part. If any of them are open to having a discussion how they felt about it, I'd invite them on the show. They could remain anonymous on how they feel about having to put their lives on the line. Maybe they just feel it's their job and they're just going to, they're loyal to their job. But maybe they feel otherwise, So I'm just kind of throwing it out there. Do you happen to have the names of these people? I would imagine they're on the report from coming out to your home.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. I wonder if any of them would be open to say, hey, Officer Smith how did you feel about going out to Beau's place and being put in that situation? Maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe they do. I don't know. But I'm just throwing it out there just in case.
Right. No, I mean, I don't have a problem, asking around and seeing, and there's a possibility, but I don't know. I can't speak for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an interesting question. I wonder how they feel. I know that there are different sheriffs around the country. Many of them up in Virginia, a couple of them in North Carolina, who won't do it. They won't go out and do it. They're not going to put their guys in jeopardy, and they're not going to disobey the oath that they took. They're not going to break the oath that they took, and that is in clear, violation of that, of doing that. When they came out to your house in the manner that they did, unfortunately, I believe they're prepared for war, and they may have in their mind already felt justified for that because they were told, this guy, he's a shooter, you better be prepared. But I think part of the issue today is there's little due diligence anymore anywhere. It's not just this. It's I think of other examples that I've seen where law enforcement, they spend, I think it's 6 months in training. Doctors spend years in training to heal people. It takes a long time to understand what's going on with people. In 6 months, I don't think they get the proper training that they should. And in many cases, they're working amongst people they don't know. It's not like, you're a neighborhood kind of. When I was growing up, I had neighborhood cops. They lived in the neighborhood. They worked the neighborhood. There were 6 of them, and I knew all 6 of them personally, and all 6 of them, unfortunately for me, because I was a little troublemaker, knew my family. But the point being is that I think in those circumstances, like when they found me doing something wrong, it wasn't like they went all, bonkers on me. All they had to do is say, I'm telling your dad. And no, please, take me to jail, But my point being is that there was a relationship there. You follow what I'm saying? It wasn't like it is today. And there, many of the police, and you being former law enforcement, I think can attest to this, they're militarized. Not only have they been militarized physically with the weapons, unfortunately, they've been militarized mentally. That in many cases they feel that where I'm going is not a citizen anymore. It's not a human being. It's my enemy, and I'm sad that it is that way. But the evidence proves that. I mean, you see the reactions that you get from these people. I think it's a lack of training when it all boils down to what is said and done. It's a lack of training. And thank God that it turned out the way that it did. Thank God that they recognized you for who you were, because I'm afraid, I tell you what, I think the odds of you surviving that, had not you been recognized as who you were justifiably angry. Hell, I'd be angry. I don't know that I probably would have walked out and talked to him. I'm not sure that I would have walked through the door. I may have opened the door and talked to them. I don't know. I don't think I'd tell them to get off the property. Before it's all over, I'm afraid there would be a shootout. I just don't think I could keep my cool. I really don't. That's why I was asking how, I understand the violation part and all that, but with respect to what was going on through your mind with, how should I say this or how should I answer that? Or, were you aware that were you raising your voice when you were speaking to him?
No, I mean, I had just apologized that I kept my cool and my composure. But a couple of times I just got very annoyed, and I told him, I said, I'm sorry, guys, and lady, there was a female officer there as well. And I said, I apologize, but I said, if you will take this report, what's so ironic about this is probably 20 minutes before they got to the residence, I had been sitting at my desk reading the entire report and the entire summons because it was rather lengthy, and I never read the entire summons before I served him. Mm-hmm. So I was sitting there reading the summons word by word. It was well over 75, 80 pages, I think.
Wow.
And when I told the officers, when I told them that before they leave, I would really like for them to read what the charges are so that they can get familiar with the type of person that this is that I had to serve or attempt to serve. Mm-hmm. And when they read that, then they were just kind of amazed and astonished that, we can see that now. But none of that was brought to their attention, prior to that. And what would have happened if I would have walked out, with a piece on my side?
I'm saying that's exactly right. That's what I'm saying. This guy was relying on that, and at that point in this event, it didn't make any difference at that point whether they realized you were the good guy or the bad guy, because all the what's the word I'm looking for? All the stress, all the tension, everything's already there. The milk has already been poured out. You know what I'm saying? It's already done. The harm has already been done. Maybe that's a better way to describe it. I'm ever so grateful that they recognized who you were and you came out of this thing to be able to see and testify to other people. Our system is broken. This is what we've been, David and Milo and I and a couple of others, Chrissy and John and Paul, we've all been discussing this broken system. And one of the ways that we can restore all of this is to bring a balance back. As a former law enforcement individual, how much did you do military too as well? I'm just curious.
I did not. I wanted to go in the military, and I came very close to going in the Navy as a SEAL program, and law enforcement called, and I went that direction.
Okay, so you took an oath, and part of the oath was to defend the Constitution. Correct?
Absolutely.
And again, I'm not trying to be smart. I'm just trying to ask an honest question. At that time, were you familiar with all the rights of the Constitution? Did they give you, if you weren't, did they give you any something to read about it? Or did you already know?
Oh, no. I mean, I knew it, but no, there was nothing given to me.
And did you have a grasp of the? Again, I'm not trying to be smart. I'm just trying to get an idea. Did you have a grasp of the Constitution when you were out there doing your law enforcement and things were happening? Did you understand that individuals had these, according to the Constitution, these individual rights that they had? Did your fellow officers feel the same way?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, because I see where circumstances where it doesn't. That. And how long ago was that? Just out of curiosity.
I left in the late '80s.
Oh my God!
You mean
okay.
This incident here?
No. I'm talking about when you were doing law enforcement. No wonder. Okay, it's completely different today. It is totally different today.
Oh, yeah.
That's like I was saying when I was growing up. We had 6 police officers that worked our neighborhood. Everybody knew each other. When anything went on, it was always. Let me put it to you this way: the majority of people lived in my neighborhood. I know the people who hear me and thinking I'm lying, but I'm telling you the truth. They left the doors open during the day because it was so secure. The neighborhood was so secure that they didn't have to worry about that. The majority of my neighbors, I could literally walk into any one of my neighbors' homes if I wanted to. Didn't have to knock the doors open. Just walk right in. It was just a completely different way of life back then. Unfortunately,
that's the way we grew up, and that's the way it was. And unfortunately, it's not that way anymore. And you know, the areas that I go into all the time. I mean, it's there's so much home invasion, and
wow.
I've had so many threats over the years, and you just become. You become kind of hardened to it, and it's awful. But
well, you have to be. You have to desensitize yourself to it. Do you, as in the job that you do in the profession that you're in, do you see a degradation in society? You see like just a breakdown almost?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I talk to my family and friends and associates all the time about it, and it just sickens me what's going on in society nowadays. And everyone, well, a lot of people always would like to be younger, and but I don't know. I just as much as I love life, I don't want to be a young person, and I feel for our children and grandchildren because it's a rough road to hoe. It's not easy out there.
We've been talking about, I call it the imbalance. I believe that there is an imbalance between the citizenry and the government at all stages, whether it's the local stage, the federal stage, the state stage, it doesn't, at all stages. I believe initially that the way things were put together in this country is there's supposed to be balance, and there was never supposed to be a time when the government was far superior in weapons than it was the citizenry. And the reason being is that when there is a balance, the government is afraid of the citizenry, the government serves the citizenry. When there's an imbalance, the citizenry is afraid of the government, and the government serves itself, and not to the benefit of the citizenry. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make is the government that we're under today, it's pretty clear to me that they clearly don't work for us. And I found out a couple of months back, I think, it's been about 6 months now, about what this reestablishment was, what this 14th Amendment did to us. And I'm still learning about all of this. But to me, it seems like it is a valid and clear and legal, non-violently legal path to get back to where we were. Because if we had things set up the way that Milo has described them to me, the way that David has described them to me, the way that John has described them, there were checks and balances far greater than we have today. That what happened to you I believe, would have never happened. There would have been a greater relationship between people. Maybe not with you per se, but with the people who are responsible. Well, let's go out to Beau's place. We're told that he's going to be a shooter. Wait a minute, let's check that out first. Who is this guy? Let's find out a little bit about him ahead of time, and let's find out about who filed the report ahead of time before we do any of that. In the older days, I'm sure you would agree with me, that kind of thing would have been standard. Before we do anything, let's find out what the hell we're doing first. We just don't show up at somebody's house just because of a piece of paper. But since all of that has changed, because it has brought this imbalance in place, now the citizenry is afraid of the government because of what the government can do with power. They may not have the authority, but you are a direct testament. They have the power. They'll show up at your place with ready for war, literally for war. If you don't comply, all hell will break out. And there is a way around this. And I believe, again, I'll let Milo, I'll give Milo a minute to talk and kind of explain what I'm talking about. But there's a way around this, and it's nonviolent. It's legal because what they did was illegal. So what we're trying to do is reverse that illegality that they did. And it is a way for us to restore our individual rights, protection for us as individuals. We're supposed to live in a constitutional republic where the individual is the important focus, and we're not. We're not even close to that. Anyway, Milo, kind of explain a little bit what I've messed up so far. You there, Milo? I can't hear you. Oh, he's probably on mute.
Sorry, had my phone on mute.
Yeah.
I was trying not to have background noise. No, I don't think you've messed anything up. There's so much that I could say and so many questions I would have to ask about, I've never actually met someone until this conversation tonight who's actually been, I guess there's no better word than a victim, who's actually been a victim of a red flag law. They're a fairly recent concept to begin with, but I mean, there's just a lot on my mind.
Well, my question to you, Milo, my question to you is, if we were living under the circumstances that you and I and David and John and Paul and Chrissy and all of this we've been talking about, if we were living under those circumstances, do you honestly think this would have happened to him?
Well, the short answer is no. I don't think it would have happened to him. But that requires some explanation, because you've got to realize, too, that the entire paradigm of society would be different. Because one of the things that precipitates these sort of laws is that, A, there's this vast gulf of as you said, personal relationships. This alienation takes place in society where we all feel like we're so separated from one another. We don't even know. I've talked about this before on your show.
Yeah.
We don't know our neighbors.
Yeah.
And so we're missing important elements of what it is to live in a community, for one thing. So, that's only one small aspect of it, and that in and of itself is a big point. But, there's also another element to look at, is that people feel like the government has a responsibility to babysit us, I guess you could say, whether you call it the nanny state, the police state, whatever. Government takes on the role of a parent. And then by default, of course, the other half of that relationship is that we, the people, the citizens, we become viewed as, we're the children. And so you have this dynamic that's almost like those with power, those who have at least the illusion of authority under law, government agents, whether they be from the executive or the legislative or the judicial branches, they all feel like they have this paternal relationship to everybody else. And that everybody else then is, at the very least, in a best case scenario, we're kind of immature, we make foolish decisions, we don't know what's best for us, and so we've got to be kind of watched out for and told what to do. And at the worst, then, of course, you take that to an extreme, is that we're just completely licentious and we engage in abhorrent behavior and what ought to be genuinely, considered genuinely criminal behavior. I mean, we're just bad people. And so then we must be punished. So there's the punitive and the paternalistic aspect that people within government tend to, and I'm not saying this applies to everybody, but tend to take on that mentality. And at the very least, it's encouraged. I'll say that with some large degree of certainty here, is that it's encouraged and facilitated by the nature of the very system. I've never been involved very much with the law enforcement side of that system or the executive side, but I have been fairly intimately involved with people who were kind of ran in the circles of the legislative side of things, and to a lesser degree, even the judicial. But all of those people tend to have this sort of view that the population needs to be, controlled and guided and governed for their own good because they don't know what's best for them.
Yep.
So there's that aspect. Are the people actually going to be able to handle the responsibility of governing themselves? I mean, Ben Franklin said something very astute. He said, it's a republic if you can keep it. And part of keeping it means that you have to
work at it.
Self-govern.
You have to work
at it.
at
Yeah, you have to self-govern. You've got to impose the limitations on yourself so that there's no need for them to be imposed from the outside. So you've got to be a moral people. You've got to be an ethical body of people. You have to generally have that mentality among the population. And one of the things that David has talked about quite a bit is the aspect of how militia is a constitutional institution, how militia is something that gives the people vested authority, and by the people I mean the entire body of people, not just a very select group within the people. But if you have that you take that even further. It's not just for the executive authority, the vested executive authority. You go even further and say that there's the committee aspect of things, where originally people engaged in the making of the laws as well as the enforcement of the law. And that was the whole body of people in any given community or any given state. Though, everyone was involved in that. It wasn't something that was relegated or handed off to a small handful of people. Please govern us, and we're just going to mind our own business and live our own lives and not participate in the business of being a community. So there's a whole lot to be said about this. And so, like I said, the short answer is no, I don't think that what would have happened would have even been imaginable, much less practically, a consequence of living under a society that conforms to constitutional original intent. But it's largely because so much about that society would have to be different in order to live under original intent. And it's not just that you can take away the element of a government, a paternalistic government that wants to or tends to oversee people's lives. And I mean, there's just so much more to it that has to be altered at the same time. And people just ultimately need to realize the imperativeness of coming together, that if we want our freedom, if we want to live as free men or free people, we have to conduct ourselves accordingly. We have to earn that responsibility. Everybody drives around with bumper stickers that says freedom isn't free. And I know what they generally mean. What they mean is you've got to pay for the military-industrial complex. You've got to support the wars. You've got to pay your taxes.
Yeah, that's not what it's supposed to mean.
Freedom isn't free.
Yep.
I'm sorry?
That's not what it's supposed to mean.
No. So to me, freedom isn't free means something very different. It means you have to be invested in a system that secures your liberty. You have to be involved in the process of living in a community and not just contribute financially to it or wear a yellow ribbon, but you have to be a part of it. You've got to be a part of the action of living in a community where those ideals of liberty are supported consistently and across the board by everybody in every conceivable way. So I don't know what else to say about that right now.
I think at one time we were like that. I think at one time early on, we relied on each other. We relied on our neighbors. We made decisions more as a group than as individuals. I think it was in everybody's best interest to do it that way. Somewhere along the line, we got the proverbial screw. But I wanted to ask David if we had, according to your understanding and in your opinion, if we had the militia in place, according to the way that it should be, do you think what happened to Beau would have happened to Beau?
No.
And it would have been a militia, right? That would have handled if they had to.
Let me share some of the differences. And by the way, again, so that people that may be hearing me say something for the first time, I've spent a decade or more studying this issue, and there's some very clear differences between the way things used to be and the way things are now. I would suggest that what we're doing today is a right thing in a wrong way. You have a very small elite group of people who executes the laws. It used to be that all of the community executed the laws because the militia executed the laws of the state, of the county, of the community. And in the Constitution, in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, they provide for executing the laws of the Union when called into the actual service of the United States. One of its main purposes was to execute laws. We didn't have any police in the United States in any community until 1841. We had sheriffs, we had constables, and we had marshals, but they had very limited purposes in that system. The patrols in the communities were done by militia. The terms the watch and the ward were militia terms. They were not used in a police system, a police department. They were used in a militia company. For example, Beau is in his late 60s, early 70s. I don't know exactly how old you are, Beau, forgive me, but he would have been an officer, more than likely, in a militia company in Leon County, okay, where he would have had years of experience. And all of those men who would have come to his door would have known him because of his position within the same company that they were members of. So there wouldn't have even been a question about Beau. There wouldn't even been a question about this other guy as to what his reputation was, because these men would have been getting together on a regular basis, month after month after month, year after year after year, in a cohesive community of society. Now, we live in a different culture than back then. When the militias went away, they didn't even have cars yet. Okay? They were still riding around in horse and buggy and, saddles and whatever, okay, or with donkeys on carts or whatever. Okay? A lot slower society, okay? So it wouldn't be exactly the same today as it would have been when the militia were removed. But every able-bodied male up until that time, after the Civil War, every able-bodied male up until the Civil War, every able-bodied white male would have been in a body politic. Now let's get a term of art clear, okay? The issue ultimately, and everything we're talking about, has to do with what's called polity. We all know the word politics or political. It's the same root word. It's the people organized politically. The militia was the way that our government, a government of the people was organized politically. A government by the people was organized politically, and it was obviously organized for the people. Okay? The militia was that, what I call the democracy of the country. It was all the people organized in such a way that they all were equal before the law. All right. Now, there was a little bit of a discrepancy there because women were not directly involved, although there are laws that required the women to have duty in certain circumstances. For instance, if you were a widow, you were responsible to make sure your sons had the weapon, and if you didn't, you as a widow were fined until they were 21 years of age. So, but it wasn't quite the same because women were not considered full citizens. There was a time right around the Revolution when women actually voted in many of the colonies, and then they took that vote away again. But the point is that generally speaking, it was the male freemen that were the citizens of the country. But the point was all of them participated, even if you were a conscientious objector. And so the point is that in the community, the men would have known everybody in the community. They would have known each other. There would have been much more of a a cohesiveness. I can't think of a better word. A continuity amongst the people, and you wouldn't have had the stranger that you were going to go and deal with and not know ultimately what kind of person he was. It's kind of interesting. Do you know there weren't really very many mass murders in America until the mid 1900s? There was only one recorded in the 1800s, and we had, holy cow, what was it, like 60 of them in 1 month or 2 months or something recently? And it's like a totally different mindset in our society than back in the day. So it would have been absolutely different if we were within that polity than what we see today. And there's no question whatsoever. Every man, for instance, when you were in the militia, you had to listen to your captain or lieutenant read all of the militia laws once or twice a year. You went to a muster meeting, and they just literally read the 40 pages of the militia statutes. You hear what I just said? 40 pages or 30 pages of laws that told you how you operated as a member of the militia, where you were responsible to know every single, just like a Beau, in your experience as a police officer, you had to know the code, right? You had to know the laws that you were required to enforce, right?
Absolutely.
Well, see, this is the way every man in the country was required to participate in a civic duty. Who does that today? If you're not in law enforcement, or you're not a fireman, or you're not an EMT, or you're not a code enforcer, you don't care one whit about the laws.
Well, I think it's been systematically.
Not required as a duty.
I think it's been systematically taken out.
Absolutely, no question whatsoever that that's what's happened. And one other thing I want to mention, there was a comment made about the fact, Milo, you were talking, and this isn't disparaging you in any way, but it's just kind of showing how far we've strayed. You made the comment about how when they make the laws, and I can't remember how you said it, but it was the idea that the laws weren't written to demand responsibility of the citizen, that he had the capability to act in a certain level of behavior. Well, or that the legislature didn't think about looking out for the best interests of the individual citizen to participate in the policies of the public policy. On the contrary, up until the militia was removed, the legislators always wrote their laws in terms of how the citizen was going to participate in the governmental structure and in the governmental oversight. It was a different mentality because that individual legislator was also in the militia. Now, he might, for a time...
I think that was kind of the point I was trying to make. I don't know if you misunderstood me or if maybe what I said didn't come across quite rightly, but what I was trying to say was pretty much in line with what you're saying, that during the time when that institution, when all of these institutions conform to original intent, just generally using that term, that the legislature was not something where you had a small body of people acting, as I guess I termed it, in a paternalistic fashion toward the rest of society. Everyone participated in that. They participated in the making of and the execution of the laws.
Yes. Yeah, and I guess what I was and you're right. That is correct. We now are in the place where they don't think in those terms because they see there's an oligarchic attitude. There's an attitude like there's two. In fact, John Whitehead, the constitutional lawyer, head of the Rutherford Institute, wrote a book called Battlefield America, the War on the American People. And in that book, he talks about the fact that there's actually two different sets of laws in our country today. One set for the elite and one set for the common man.
I don't think it could be more evident.
This is where the problem is. This is what we have to correct. And I'll just say this, Beau, I'm so excited that you now are aware of this problem. and you have connections to men and women who are now seeing that this is something that they're going to have to realize is not too far from home, because we have got to get the people of this country who have that clout, who have that wherewithal, to understand that this is coming to their door just as much as it's coming to the community. The black community has talked about this problem for decades. Okay, they've seen them being treated as a second-class society and have had no way out of it. We're now seeing it happening in the middle-class white neighborhood society more and more every day, and now it's even coming where it's affecting the actual people that have the privilege more than anybody else. Law enforcement and public officials are now saying, you know what, it's getting a little bit too close to home. We have got to start realizing what is threatening all of us. Let's take it back to Virginia, where the people in Virginia are going, they're taking away my ability to protect my family and to protect my business and to protect my community. And they don't care that they are disarming me. They don't care that they are taking away my ability to have self-defense. We're having to rely on someone else's defense. That's not the way that things were set up in this country, and it's not the way that a society that is civil and civilized is able to self-govern. It's just not the way it will work. And what you'll end up with eventually is democide. You'll end up with death by government. It will happen. It's the inevitable course of where this is all going. And we'd better wake up and realize what's coming, because history repeats itself. And as Jorge Santana said, they who cannot remember the bad past are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah, well said.
They use excuses that, any of us who know what's going on know that the end result is disarmament. That's what they want. They use excuses that you're going to be safer, or that guns kill so many people per year, and if we didn't have the guns, society would be safer, on and on and on. But they don't. One thing they don't do is they don't use facts. They don't go to the facts, because if they did, they'd have to face, some of these things.
They have to face the facts.
Yeah, and what they'd have to face are, the data shows that the guns are not the problem. The guns, anywhere that you look, the guns aren't the issue, because there's so many places where there's, great examples. Virginia, an estimated 60,000 people, I think it was, many of them armed to the teeth, not a single person shot, not a single person arrested, not even the area that they were in wasn't even left in a mess. So if guns were the problem, how could we have that many people together and not a single shot fired? So obviously that's not an accurate statement that guns are the problem. Something else has gone on. Something has gone astray. And what has gone astray is our moral compass, I think is the way people refer to it. Because people refuse to look at, if you look at the facts, then you have to come to the conclusion of the facts. The conclusion of the facts are the problems aren't guns. The problems are our society, our hearts that are cold. It's mental. It's not so much the physical part and the idea that they're going to villainize. I'm seeing it's getting late. They're going to villainize something by calling it an assault weapon. That's nonsense. The truth of the matter is that these are tools. They can be used to harm an innocent person, or they can be used to harm someone who's going to harm you. It is not up to the tool, it's up to the individual. And that's an area where they don't want to look. And that's an area that is vital to our freedom. And unfortunately, many people are asleep to this. And sadly, people like you, Beau, have had to experience a nightmare that could, fortunately for you, I'm so grateful that it worked out for you. But, you said if you were an average guy, this would probably haunt them for the rest of their lives. They would not be able to enjoy the profession that they were in for however many years that they were in because of this, and yet they hadn't done nothing wrong. We need some help straightening this stuff out, and the more people...
Hey, Riscala?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask Beau a question and in a way put you on the spot, Beau, but not really, because this is really a conversation we're having here tonight. And I've shared a bunch of things here in the last few minutes. I know we've not talked about a lot of this. Some of this is probably new to you. I'd like to get your feedback on, if you want to share it, you don't have to, on just this concept that's been thrown around tonight in light of your background and experience, and be honest, and even if it's not completely in agreement, what's your take on some of these ideas that have been suggested with respect to giving the people back their vested authority and the concept of, and let me just clarify it, implementing once again what used to be, which was a group of men back in the day, could be men and women today, who would be armed, accoutered, trained, organized, disciplined, and vested in the community to be involved in the execution of law and be involved in the way that the community self-governs itself. Does that sound like something you would think is a reasonable direction to go again? Or I'd just like your take because of your experience and your background and how many years you've spent in that world. Would you mind sharing your thoughts?
So, I guess what you're asking is, would I feel maybe strongly about having almost like a small military of people within your neighborhood, kind of taking law into their own hands?
No, sir. I'm actually saying if you had the same levels of regulation, the same levels of disciplinary control, with the same types of structure, okay? Which, by the way, is the way it used to be. It's the way it was for 275 years since the original colonies came into place in the 1600s, all the way up to the early 1900s. That's what we had in America. We don't even know it existed, where the people themselves they had the police power. Right. And they were responsible to participate in that civic duty. So that there was no chief of police.
I'm sorry to interject, but there might be an easy way to say this to explain it.
Go ahead.
If perhaps you can imagine if a sheriff were to do something that has been suggested in Virginia. I don't know that, I'm not saying I'm 100% in support of the way that it was suggested in Virginia, but to deputize an entire county. And if the entire county all deputized, then had the training and the education and the understanding to act effectively and properly in the capacity of their new role. That to me seems like a fairly succinct way to explain what David's trying to get at, I think.
It was called the posse comitatus back in the day, by the way. That term is actually in the Federalist Papers. It's the power of the county. It was a very well-regulated militia. Means you have a lot of regulations to govern it. It was put in place by the legislature. And if you go look at the history, that's the way it was. Like I said, twice a year, the captain or lieutenant of the company read all of those statutes to the entire company, and they were obligated to know those statutes. Just like a police officer goes through, and by the way, there would have been ongoing training all the time, just like you have to go through law enforcement training in order to be a law enforcement officer. That's the way it was done back in the day. not exactly the same way, but generally speaking, the same way. That's what we're saying. What if the people, and ultimately the ones who really wanted to participate would, the others could opt out of it, and that's the way it was back then, but there was a duty to participate in serving as much as you participated by paying your taxes. That's what I'm asking. Does that sound like something reasonable or ridiculous in your mind?
No, I think absolutely reasonable.
Okay.
All right, let me. We'll take a moment here because I want to get some water anywhere. We'll take a break. We'll take a moment for a break here, and then we'll be back. You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show. Tonight I have Beau with me. I have Milo with me. I have David with me. Beau was the unfortunate victim. Thank God was looking over him at that particular moment. He was the unfortunate victim of a red flag law. Did nothing wrong and woke up one morning or afternoon, whenever it was, with a yard full of police officers waiting to greet him with weapons of, let's just say friendly, less than friendly weapons, if there is such a thing. All right, we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show. Don't go away. Here we go.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin.
Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Collins, and distinguished members of Congress. My name is Amy Swearer, and I am the Senior Legal Policy Analyst at the Heritage Foundation's Ed Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Just as doctors can only recommend an effective treatment plan if they first form a correct diagnosis based on accurate assessment of the symptoms, policy analysts and policy makers must have an accurate understanding of the societal problems they are seeking to combat. Unfortunately, too many policymakers appear completely uninformed about basic factual realities related to guns and gun violence. Don't misunderstand me. We all want safer communities, but the characteristics distinguishing so-called assault weapons from non-assault weapons are not factors like caliber, lethality, or rate of fire. Proposals to ban scary-looking features like barrel shrouds or pistol grips are, for all intents and purposes, proposals to force law-abiding citizens to own guns that are harder for them to handle, harder to fire accurately, and more likely to cause them injuries, even when they are being used for lawful purposes. Moreover, semi-automatic rifles are not a meaningful driving factor behind rates of gun violence. 2/3 of gun deaths in this country are suicides, where the type of firearm is essentially irrelevant. With respect to gun crimes, over 90% are committed with handguns. Rifles of any kind are definitively used in only 3 to 4% of gun homicides every year, and an American citizen is 4 times as likely to be stabbed to death than they are to be shot to death with a rifle of any kind. Despite frequent claims that semi-automatic rifles are the weapon of choice for mass public shooters, in the last decade, over half of these shootings have been carried out with handguns alone. On the other hand, semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15 are so well suited for defensive action against threats in a civilian context that the Department of Homeland Security quite literally designates them as personal defense weapons for law enforcement officers. It is little wonder, then, that millions of law-abiding citizens in this country also choose these types of semi-automatic rifles as their own personal defense weapons. Far from needing to be protected from these rifles, law-abiding Americans benefit when they are allowed to defend themselves with them, particularly in situations where they are outnumbered. Just last week, a homeowner in Rockdale County, Georgia, relied on his scary-looking semi-automatic assault weapon to defend himself against 3 masked teens armed with at least 1 handgun who tried to rob him and other residents in their own front yard. Ironically, the rifle deemed an assault weapon by many in this room was used defensively to protect innocent people against assault, while the perpetrators used a non-assault weapon offensively to commit actual assault. Importantly, some of the most famous examples of the defensive use of assault weapons by civilians come from scenarios where the government has been either unable or unwilling to defend entire communities from large-scale civil unrest. During the 1992 LA riots, for example, law enforcement was nowhere to be found as hundreds of looters ransacked Koreatown. Ordinary store owners like Richard Ree and his employees took it upon themselves to defend their livelihoods from lawlessness, using, in many cases, semi-automatic rifles. Similar stories emerged during the civil unrest in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. There are some here today who still genuinely don't understand why or how anyone would need such scary-looking rifles for purposes other than mass murder. And so I have permission from my mother to explain it to you by partially embarrassing her. My mother did not grow up with firearms, and they will never be her favorite thing in the world. In fact, she'd never handled a firearm until I took her to the range for the first time several years ago. Now, I love my mother, but like every other novice with a handgun, she was quite bad. I mean, she struggled to hit a stationary target from 6 yards out under ideal conditions. And then she picked up an AR-15. And I watched my mother put a fist-sized grouping of lead in the center mass of a target from 20 yards out. That is why law-abiding citizens buy millions of these firearms. When accuracy and stopping power matter, they are simply better. Americans use firearms to defend themselves between 500,000 and 2 million times every year. God forbid that my mother is ever faced with a scenario where she has to stop a threat to her life. But if she is, I hope politicians protected by professional armed security didn't strip her of the right to use the firearm she can handle most competently. Frankly, I hope she has in her hands the scariest looking assault weapon she can find, so that we can both be confident in her ability to end the threat. Thank you.
I got all the good ones, so I got Ukraine, and I remember going over convincing our team, or others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, "No," I said, "I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion." They said, "You have no authority. You're not the president." The president said. I said, "Call him." I said, "I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion." I said, "You're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here." And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, "I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money." Oh, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill. You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
You're listening to the Red Pill Reality Show with your host, Riscala, every Saturday night on the LNM Network from 9 p.m. to midnight. And now your host, Riscala.
Take the red pill, take the blue pill, take the red pill, take the blue pill.
All right, we are back. It is the Red Pill Reality Show, an honor and a privilege to have you tune in and listen. And tonight, you know, I asked earlier on at the beginning of the show, those of you who listen to the network, to please consider making a donation, or the best thing really is to give us a subscription. It's a whopping $5 a month. And I promise you the information that you'll get will be well worth every penny of that $5. If it wasn't well worth it already, just in the short time that we've done this show, well worth every bit of the $5 that we're asking you to invest with us. That's really what it boils down to, is to invest with us as a network, because we do have bills that have to be paid. And I have said many times, I don't ask anything of you out there that I don't do myself. I am a subscriber. I believe in what we're doing. From the very moment that Michael had to ask for subscriptions, I was one among the first to subscribe because I believe in what we're doing. I believe in what is now known as WCET-FM 101.7 South Carolina, our home, our mothership, as he refers to it. But we got bills we got to pay. I mean, that's the reality. And unfortunately, there's not a lot. But unfortunately, it is what it is. And in order to keep things going, we require to ask people to invest with us. So that's what we're doing. We're asking for you to invest with us. Invest in what used to be the LNM radio network for many, many years. Now it's WCET-FM. Help us out as we help you out, giving you information. I don't think I would have ever found out about this, what we're discussing tonight with regard to this reestablishment subject. I don't think I would have ever found out about this on my own. Had it not been through an acquaintance, and then actually one, Angel, who co-hosted the Red Pill Reality Show with me for a while, as I was kind of helping her learn the ropes of radio, introduced me to David, and David introduced me to John and Milo and Chrissy and Paul and other. But on my own, I don't believe in coincidences. I think this was an answer to prayer. I've been praying for a long time. God, there's got to be a better way. Things are not right in this country. There has to be a better way. I keep seeing these examples of how things are just so wrong, and we're supposed to live in the land of the free, and I look at data that says for the land of the free, we have the most incarcerated people on the face of the planet. There's no other country that has more people in prison than the United States. There's something wrong. Something is not in balance. And much of that, I believe, is rooted in something that happened to us as a nation a long time ago. If we don't face the truth, if we don't come to grips with what has happened, we will constantly live in a lie. If you constantly live in a lie, in my personal opinion, you will never be fully joyful, satisfied. I'm not sure of the correct word to describe it. But you'll never fulfill. You'll never feel that feeling of fulfillment in your life because you won't be truly free. Because the truth is the bottom line of what is going to set us free. Truth is the greatest weapon that we have at our disposal. Truth is the only thing that they can't take. They can't legislate it from us. They can't steal it from us. Once it's in your mind, once you understand, they can't take that away from you. And that's what we're sharing tonight. We're sharing truth, as accurate as I can be. And things can be better for all of us. If you're not happy with the way things are, why don't you start thinking about, well, what can we do to start making things better? Because what we're describing to you tonight is a valid way, a legal way, a nonviolent way of making things better for everybody, not just for, you think about it. I think the last call was around 300 million, maybe a little over 300 million people living in this country. And it all boils down to a little over, less than 1,000 people when you look at the Congress and the Senate and all of those other people involved. It's probably less than 1,000 people are making decisions for us. That's just not right. I'm sorry. My logic says, that's wrong. Gong bell. I don't know if you guys remember the Gong show, but people come out with their talent, and if they didn't like them, hit the gong, and down the tubes they go. Gong bell. That's nonsense. There has to be a better way. Well, we're talking about that better way. All right. If you want to get involved, we've got a couple of minutes left. I'll open the phone lines up. We've been so involved in the conversation. I really, I didn't want to break away, but there may be some people who have a question or a comment. So if you want to do that, we'll do that. All right. The phone lines, 561-440-5174. 561-440-5174. Just remain muted when you call in, and I'll get to you ASAP. All right, we're back. David, Milo, Beau. Beau, thank you for taking the time to call in. Milo, excellent job at explaining things. David, you are a true educator, my friend. So let me go back to Beau, since he hasn't had an opportunity in a little while here. Anything you'd like to add, any comments you'd like to add, Beau, to what we've discussed tonight?
I don't believe so at this time. I think we've covered it, but I just, I just feel sorry for the people that have cases like this against them, and people in the near future that have to face this kind of stuff and really have no way out. I mean, it's, for whatever reason, they either don't have the finances, or they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have the connections, whatever it is. But, I've always been blessed, and I've been blessed to be surrounded by great people and educated people and career people that when they heard about this, they immediately came to my defense. Not that I needed it, because I knew that I did nothing wrong, but there were attorneys and, like I said earlier, competitors of mine that all felt that, we're going to be there, we're going to support you, and they took the bull by the horns, and they did the attorneys did a remarkable job, and they just couldn't believe that, something like this took place.
I wonder if we documented this somehow, if we could raise this to our legislators in Tallahassee and show them how this is so dangerous. Again, it's a perfect, for you, it was a perfect opportunity to experience a nightmare, but come out of it alive. I think if you talk to maybe 100 people, maybe 10, would have come out of this thing alive. I think the rest of them would have shot it out with the cops, and they're going to disagree. Look, I haven't done anything wrong. You're not taking my weapons. And everything escalates from there. It's just seconds, literally seconds. And before you know it, the guns are already drawn on their side, and bullets are flying. And it's no longer a one-shot deal. It's trained to take down the threat. And taking down the threat means taking you out, really, basically. I think anyone else would not have fared anywhere near as well as you. And then thank God that the judge was a judge with integrity, because unfortunately our system is messed up all the way around, guys. It's not just these laws. There's a lot of corrupt judges out there as well. So it's a good thing that he got somebody who had some integrity and said, no, you present your you've brought us this far. Present your case now, or kiss it goodbye. So I'm glad went in your favor, Beau, but for the average guy, it wouldn't have been that way. It would have been an absolute nightmare. And I could imagine more than likely it would have ruined their lives. You describe about how you have this shadow, this black cloud over you wherever you go. Anywhere, any job that would require any kind of a background check, you'd fail. So what job doesn't require a background check? I mean, if you want to go bag groceries, even them, I think they do a background check. I was going to say, even if you want to go bag groceries, but I don't think you can get there without a background check. I don't know of any job that you can get without a background check. And if you're failing your background check, what are you going to do for work? So this person, I think what's sad is that it happened to you to begin with. I think what is salt in the wound is that this person, I'll use that word very, very plainly, I'd like to refer to him in another word, but this person didn't even get punished, knowing that it had come out into light that what he had done was lied, purposely perpetrated a plan to destroy another human being. It would be the same thing as holding a gun to his head and not pulling the trigger, but knowing that the gun is loaded and having his finger on the trigger. It's not much different when you're looking at how much money it would have cost for the average person. 3 lawyers Thank God that they stepped up to the plate. All the friends that he had, thank God that they came to his rescue. In my microcosm of experiences, a lot of people won't do that. I don't have time for that. I want to get involved. I don't want to be, get in the middle of that. Thank God there are people who still think that way, that think along the lines that this is my friend, I'm sticking to this, they can't get away with this. Because today, the average person, a lot of them don't think like that anymore. It's sad, but this is by design. Go ahead.
And what happened is the people that did show up at the courtroom that day were, like I said, either competitors. A lot of them were even process servers that were not only there for the support and that they've known me for years, but also they wanted to know what the outcome and what the verdict was going to be because of their jobs and their future. If this, happens to them, and it could very well
easily,
and that was a big concern of theirs, and it still is because this law is still on the books. And I have decided since this took place that I was going to become a spokesman, for other people that have experienced this, and not only for the past, but for the present, for the people that could face this starting, tomorrow. So it's a big concern, and I'm in the same boat that you gentlemen are in. I'm just really concerned what's going on in this country, and I just feel for our children and grandchildren because I really feel that they just don't have the fair shot like we did.
No, they don't. They're subjected to so much more than we were growing up. And the greatest detriment to our society is this attack on the family. I see this outright attack on the family. And the breakup of that family, again, this is my opinion, my experience of life. I see the breakup of the family. The family was the very backbone of this country. We talk about make the country great again. In my view, in their view, making the country great again is financially strong. In my view, making the country great again is like when I was growing up. I lived in a neighborhood where the majority of the people didn't lock their doors. We knew our police officers personally. They knew our family personally. That was great because the security was. Nobody could get away with anything. I'd be the first to tell you because I was a little brat, and I don't know how. I found all kinds of ways to get in trouble, and they found all kinds of ways to figure out what I was doing because the people were aware of what was going on. It wasn't like it is today with regard to finances. If you so chose, one of the parents could go to work while the other remained home working at home, working at whatever was required to do at home. And that person was aware of the neighborhood. It was like a constant neighborhood watch. It's not anything like that anymore. And for people who have grown up in this, they don't miss that because they've never experienced it. For me, when I look back at it, I see how everything has been twisted. Everything is out of balance. I don't know how else to describe it. We have a government that is far overreaching, and people are accepting it. Why? Because they don't remember or they never experienced what I've experienced. And if they had, they wouldn't allow what's going on today. We wouldn't allow these people to take away from us what is rightfully ours. They don't have any right to, they don't have the authority. Again, they do not have the authority, but they do have the power. And that is wherein the problem lies. And when we're talking about this reestablishment thing, this is them having to give up the power. They're not just going to give this up. There's going to be a fight involved. Just like I described earlier about a deep wound. It's going to bleed. It's going to hurt. But if it's done right, if it's put back together correctly, then we can properly heal. And in many cases, a wound that has properly healed, that area is stronger than it was previously. That's what I want for my children and my grandchildren. I can't see a country that has been deteriorating. Gosh, just in the last 3 decades, the deterioration, if you could graph it, it's just like almost straight up now with everything that they're pushing. And people are just accepting, like, well, we should accept it. It's all right, Rascal. It's all right to accept this. It's all right. No, it's not all right. Some of this stuff is not acceptable. Some of these things that people want us to accept as normal is not normal. And part of this is coming from our government, what we call government. It's people within our government. And if we don't take handle of what has been given to us, sadly, this has been given to many people who are alive today who don't really give a rat's behind, if you understand what I'm saying, because they don't have any skin in the game. I have skin in the game. I have friends that fought for this country. I have friends that died for this country. And they did it doing under a belief system that they were doing it for everybody else. I have skin in the system. I remember what it was like during the Vietnam War. Many people don't have any clue what it would be like if war broke out in the streets. They have no idea that how people can become animals literally overnight. Just think about what happens when a hurricane hits here in Florida or some other place. Here in Florida, it's not too bad, but Hurricane Andrew was a hurricane that caused me to move my home from South Florida. Stores were looted, just a hurricane. This wasn't even an all-out emergency per se at the time with regard to like a Civil War kind of thing. People were looting just at their leisure, were looting stores for whatever they wanted. Now imagine that going on for months and months and months and months. It's not going to be at their leisure anymore. They're going to start looking for weapons. They'll find weapons, then they'll start killing people to get what they want. Nothing will stop them once they fall into this animalistic stage, I call it, because the thirst for blood is never ending. I don't ever want to see that in this country. And I think, sadly, not enough people have shared the experience of that because it hurts so bad. And because of that, people don't really have an idea. Now, Beau may have an idea because he's a former law enforcement officer. He may have a tip of the iceberg kind of idea because he's had to be out there with the nasties, and he's probably experienced how nasty people can get. But to be in a war is a little different. It's just a little different. It's a whole mindset. And to experience that and to think that that could possibly happen in my neighborhood, in my state, is a very concerning thought to me. And I really believe that Virginia is on the verge of that. Virginia's been pushed to the limit. And I will tell you, without question in my mind, this is all by design. These bullies, as I referred to them earlier, they want to push us up against the wall, continuously up against the wall, until one of us punches back. At that point, they're going to say, we have to defend ourselves, and these are domestic terrorists, and they need to be taken down. That's their goal. That's because people like me, people like David, people like Milo, I won't speak for Beau because Beau and I haven't had off-the-air conversations, but we believe basically in the Constitution, the way that it was originally set up. The government is not supposed to have the authority to do what they're doing, and they don't. Even to this day, they don't. But they have a presumed authority because they have the end of the barrel of a gun. And that's not the way things are supposed to work. So people like us who speak out against it, they're not happy with us. They would rather see us go away somewhere because we are troublemakers to them. To them, we are actually domestic terrorists. We are in that aspect. But we're not domestic terrorists in the sense that we present a danger to the common person, to the common citizen. We present a danger to the criminals that pretend to be government. That's the danger that we present. That's the domestic terrorism that we represent. It's not that we're going to go blow anybody up. It's not that we're going to go kill anybody. It's that we know you are criminals and you belong in prison, and we're telling other people, and they don't like that. That makes us, people like us, domestic terrorists. And that way they can vilify us and justify whatever means they need to use in order to shut us up. I am shocked that, honestly, and I know this sounds callous, but I am shocked that if this happened, what happened to Beau happened to anyone else, I am shocked to see or know that they would walk away breathing, or I really am. Because every piece of evidence, every experience that I have seen, this would have been a completely different scenario, totally different scenario. And again, I use this because this is not the way that it's supposed to be, people. This is not the way it's supposed to be. It was never okay to have these no-knock warrants. That was never supposed to ever happen. Again, brought about through design and our rights being eaten away. I believe that would fall under supposedly under the Constitution that we have, the Fourth Amendment, or not the Fourth Amendment. Is it the Fourth Amendment? You're safe in your home, and I don't know. It's late at night, and I can't keep track of them all. But I think it's the Fourth Amendment under the Constitution. We're supposed to feel safe in our home. We're supposed to feel, secure in our home. How secure can you feel? Have you seen some of these no-knock warrants when they think they're going after somebody who's really dangerous and it ends up being the wrong address? One of them was the wrong address. They ended up shooting a man in bed, an 87-year-old man or 86-year-old man shooting him in bed. It's horrible. We're not supposed to be living under these circumstances. So when people have had enough, I guess like David says, then they'll rise. I had enough a long time ago. I want people to feel the disgust that I feel, that it is absolutely vital that we start to do something to make things better. People my age, we don't have a whole lot left in this place. I call it level. I'm at 6.7 at this point. I'm at level 6.7. How much longer have I got? 20 years? I would like to see, if I'm lucky, I would like to see during that time a graduation back to the way things used to be, a integrity. I don't know the right words to describe it. There was integrity back then. The average person knew more about what was going on within our neighborhoods and our communities and our local governments, because I think all of this really starts at the local level. If we can take care of it at the local level, it'll gradually work its way up to the top. But I think it was a different mindset back then. It was a different morale back then. The one thing that I bring up on the show all the time is guns, because I totally believe if they disarm us, we're up, what's creek. So I constantly bring that up. When I was a kid in high school, we had guys show up in high school. We had guys with pickup trucks with guns, high-powered guns, 308, I think is what the popular one. I think that's what it was. High-powered rifles with scopes on them that somebody could consider a sniper rifle. Okay, and show up at school loaded. These things were loaded. Do you think they called a SWAT team? Do you think they called a fire department? Do you think they called out the military? Do you think it was on the news at night? None of that happened. They called a kid to school and said, you get your butt out of here and you're suspended. Don't come back with that or you're going to be expelled. But they didn't make it. And do you think the kid that brought the gun to school is going, I can't wait to shoot somebody? It was a completely different mindset. And all of that, I believe, in my opinion, has been designed into place to fall us and bring us into where we are today, where kids can't even be safe at school. They can't even be safe at school, of all places. So it doesn't surprise me.
My thoughts, and I agree with all of that, is that all started with the family, like you said, and that in my childhood days, when you were in school, if you got in trouble or did something that you should not have done in school, the teacher, the principal, they would take care of it. Mm-hmm. Then they would take you out to the field house, and whatever sport you were playing at that time of the year, that particular coach would meet you out at the field house, and he would paddle you with a wooden paddle.
That's right.
And then they would immediately call home, and Mom is at home, and she's waiting, and she beats me with a belt. Mm-hmm. And then good old Dad gets home at 5:36, 6:30 that evening, and he's already been notified by Mom. And so now you get a beating from Dad, and how many beatings does it take? And then, nowadays the poor teachers, which I think is probably the worst job in the world to have, because the teacher's hands are completely tied. They can't say or do anything to the student. The parents cannot touch the child because the child knows enough now that the parent can't use excessive force on the child, or the courts and the system will go after the parents. Mm-hmm. Law enforcement can't touch the child. It's just, and then you got all the people that hate God anymore, and you got the people that hate the American flag that are driving around in neighborhoods and they're threatening people, take down your flag or there'll be consequences. I don't understand it. And I don't understand that this is all going on in this great country and no one stands up for it.
Well, some of us
I
do,
don't know.
Beau, and I think that that's the point of the show tonight. Is some of us are trying to figure out a reasonable way to approach this that has substance to it, and gets us back to what I would call the fundamentals, the basic concepts that people need to understand in order to fix the problem. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. I shouldn't have probably done that. But
no.
And I think that this last 20 minutes or so, or 15 minutes we have, we need to spend a few minutes talking about where a remedy lies. Where can we go with now looking at? By the way, up until August of 2019, there were over 2,600 persons in the state of Florida who had their guns confiscated from them under this law. And what the argument is that many of these people have a mental health issue. It's so, in one respect, it's scary because we know, if we've known anything about the history of the USSR, it was mental health that was used as the major excuse to wipe out millions of people. When you start going to the issue of what's inside a person's head and using that as the excuse to say that they're ill, you have a tremendous threat to the good people of society, because all you got to say is if the people begin to question the government, there must be a mental illness.
Yeah, well, they've already started that, David.
Yeah, of course. So, my point is we need to take this back to a place where we do something different to achieve a different result. Don't be insane anymore, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We need to suggest a different approach. And the different approach should take into account the history, the good history of our own country, the things that have been done in the past that resulted in a good end, and see if from that we might learn the lessons of history so we're blessed to repeat them. That's as you know, Rosella, the first thing I ever talked about when we ever first started talking.
Yep.
And so
I agree.
I'd like to open up to Milo even. I know he's got some thoughts too, but my thoughts are we've put together a concept over the last 12, 13 shows we've done with Riscala about pursuing a course where we get the people to understand institutions that are clearly identified in our constitutional documents that don't exist anymore, but they're still in the document. That well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. And the people in Virginia are now saying, we want that back, because Section 13 of their Bill of Rights says that the well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people, trained to arms, is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. So where is it? Why don't we have it? What do we need to put it back? And then understanding that militia is overseen by committees of the civil people, of the civil society, of the civil government, who actually make sure that it operates in the ways that's actually going to be amenable to a civil society. So why aren't we discussing that this is a solution that's already been historically proven to be valid, that was taken away through a surreptitious subversion? The people didn't even know what was being done to them. And we investigate and understand how it might be put back in a way that gives the people back their authority. That, to me, is part of the answer.
And the way that we're going to do that?
Excuse me?
And the way that we're going to do that?
Well, if we start with conversation, we start with understanding the issue of our citizenship. And I mean, Milo, I might even open up to you that you might give us some suggestions on this point. We're working on a plan. We're talking about it on the show. We're going to continue opening it up and explain it as we move forward. We want to talk to the people in Virginia and explain to them how to do the right thing in the right way, not the right thing in the wrong way. That's where it begins.
And we're next, by the way.
Along with several other states in this country.
So you better wake up, Florida, because you're in the crosshairs of these.
The people that passed the Broadman-Douglas bill said this is just the beginning. They said that a year ago.
Yeah.
And that was a railroaded bill, by the way. It was completely railroaded.
Yeah.
I can show the evidence of that.
Well, I agree with you, David. The first thing is let's awareness, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. Is bring
With
awareness.
relevance, by the way. What's the relevance of the awareness? What's the things we need to really understand?
Well, the thing to really understand, by golly, if it happened to Beau, and he's a former law enforcement agent, imagine it can happen to just about anybody. And the circumstances under which this occurred is truly disturbing, really disturbing.
It's happening over 5 times a day.
My confidence in the system continues to deteriorate drastically as I hear about these horrific stories. Imagine being in. I think about this old man. He was a grandfather. Apparently, his grandchild. No, I've got it wrong. He was a grandfather, and one of the detectives said that he checked the place out and he smelled methamphetamines, the odors of methamphetamines coming from the place. So he was certain that the place was a lab. So they swatted the guy. They came in. They found nothing. He was laying in bed, and he died in his bed because they shot him in his bed. They felt threatened. He had a gun in the nightstand next to his bed, and they shot him in his bed. Of course, the report said a little bit different, but once the body cams were revealed, it revealed a different story. My point being is that these laws can be very easily abused. Some people may have passed them with a good intention of let's get the crazies, let's get them out of the crazies' hands. And I agree, there are people who do not belong with weapons. I totally agree. But the process in which that is done, I do not agree. And therein lies the problem. There are
It's the issue of due process. It's what the point is that the due process is being violated. And it's actually unconstitutional in that respect, some of us believe.
All right, Milo, we've kind of left you out. Let me give you a minute to kind of respond to anything that we've said, any comments that you want to make as we get a little closer to the end of the show here.
Yeah, it's getting close to that time, so I appreciate that. But no, you guys just touched on the one thing that's been on my mind since the last break, and I guess the only thing that I would say about that is that there's an important relationship between a society's value of lawfulness and then, of course, the rights and liberties and freedoms that people have, and by correspondence, there also their liberty to be free from a reasonable fear of being abused. And so, what happened to Beau? I mean, you used the term a minute ago. There's a term. It's called being swatted, and being swatted, being a victim of a red flag law like that, and it not being justifiable. And I don't think, because of the nature of the way the laws are written, those particular acts are written when they're bills. None of them actually do what needs to be done, which is, and this is kind of the point, which is to put due process up at the forefront. You can't violate someone's rights. You can't justifiably violate someone's rights without having given them due process and the opportunity to face their accusers and present evidence and have counsel and all of these other things that people almost take for granted. So, but being swatted is just a taste of what happened. I mean, it's just just a taste, and the list is enormous. But this is one example of what happens when a society abandons fidelity or having a commitment to due process of law. And what that ultimately means is that a society that accepts this kind of situation is a society that has literally embraced lawlessness as a systemic aspect of its existence. That it has abandoned a core value that things have to proceed according to the process that the law of the land describes. And just lost that. We've given that up. I mean, the fact that these red flag laws are so prevalent and continuing to be proposed in new states all the time, and that the numbers of people are being abused by these laws, and I mean, they're still there. Nobody's talking about repealing them.
Yeah.
Just that.
But we are.
Well, that's true. We certainly are. But just that alone is enough to demonstrate just how far we've come as a society away from the idea that we ought to have some kind of dignity, and that our system of social cohesion and process ought to conform to the law in every aspect. And it just doesn't.
Yeah, I think that was purposely designed out. All right, we are all out of time. I think, David, if you can make it real quick, I'll let you go, Dave.
Oh, I didn't have anything else to share except I'm excited that we had Beau on tonight to learn his story, to just increase the quality of the necessity to understand this important subject and all the ramifications of it. This is just one piece. It's the tip of the iceberg.
I think
what's going on.
I think we need to find a way to, however the legal term, dissolve these. How we remove them, dissolve them, or whatever it's called, these laws, because they're too easy to take advantage of them. Beau, thank you for taking the time to call in.
It goes way beyond just those laws.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend, and I hope to hear from you again. If you ever talk to any of those guys, those cops that were there, and get an idea how they felt, if you want to give me feedback, I'm open to that. Or if any of them want to come on, we'll leave them anonymous if they want. But I'd be curious to see how they felt about it as well. All right, everybody, we are out of time. A big thank you to Milo. A big thank you to David. Big thank you to Beau. You've been listening to the Red Pill Reality Show. We got to get out of here.
Take the red pill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take the red pill. Take the blue pill. 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 You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, 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 take the red. You stay in Wonderland. You stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.